come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. Folks, if you've got anything to add, give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to have time for calls today, so we'd love to hear from you. There's so much going on in the news today. Trump might be dead. I think that's very funny that that literally like every fourth tweet in my Twitter feed is somebody saying that my sources are saying that Trump has died, and it's all a joke, and it's just a joke because he hasn't done like a public event, or he hasn't like tweeted anything or like been public about anything in like 4 or 5 days. And so it's very funny that like the president's out of the news for the better part of a week and everybody's like, I bet he's dying. I think that must be it. Lots of union news going on. The UAW wins an election in Kentucky. We're going to be talking about that more in detail in the second half of the program. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. But lots of stuff to get to today. 844-899-TVLR if you want to comment on any of it, or if you just want to ask us a question that is unrelated to the topic at hand. It is also Labor Day weekend. Labor Day weekend. This is like one of two Christmases for me. Adam, talk to us about Labor Day.
That's right. Yeah, it's a big day. My wife told me this is our day to shine, Jacob.
That's right.
So we're pretty busy as union folks around this time of year. You know, with Labor Day weekend, for many, that's a time of food and football and family and kind of a last taste of summer. With the 3-day weekend, you hope, right? Not every worker does get Labor Day off, but many do. And so for a lot of families, a lot of folks, it's a fun time. But as labor unionists, it's also an opportunity for us to tell our story and share our story and really illustrate why we have this holiday in the first place, right? Thanks to the achievements, the courage, the struggles, and sacrifices of working people in our unions throughout our history. You know, the fight for the 8-hour day, child labor laws, workplace safety, we could go on and on. Labor rights have not been given to us. These rights were not simply handed out, like civil rights, like women's rights, like all of our human rights. We've had to fight and engage in collective struggle to make progress. So Labor Day is that moment to reflect on the power of working people. But this Labor Day, our movement is facing some of the toughest challenges we faced in many, many decades. We are moving backwards. We're losing ground on those hard-fought rights. Our freedoms, our families, and our security are under attack. And in this dire moment, we can look around and see mass confusion and shameless deception. There's widespread alienation and disengagement among the working class majority. We're all flooded with misinformation and contrived distractions and AI garbage. Corporate power is increasing its grip over the media, and the far right wing pumps out propaganda on a really monumental scale. So given this context, Jacob, why do you think labor media is so important in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, labor media is it's always important. We started this program back over 5 years ago now because I felt like there is such a lack of understanding among kind of the general populace about how we got things like the 8-hour day, how we got things like the weekend, how we got paid leave, to the extent that many people even have those anymore. And the way that we got that is through organizing and unions. And unions used to be such a huge institution, and they still are in the lives of many people, but they used to be such a huge institution. Even in a state like Alabama, there were multiple labor newspapers. Just up here in North Alabama, we had the Shoals Labor Advocate was around for a long time, a production of the Shoals Labor Council and the Building Trades Council. And media like that was so important in pushing back against the robber barons of the day, against the politicians in either political party. And, both of the political parties that were around back then were very different than the ones that are around today in many ways. But in many ways, they're both the same. They're very similar in that many politicians in both parties today and 100 years ago have been captured by a corporate class that wants to undercut any rights that working people have, any freedoms that we have in and from the workplace. And so having media that is funded by working people, that is funded by the labor movement, that is funded by normal people in the community rather than companies that are trying to advertise a product to you, or rather than oil barons who want to push a particular political agenda. I think there's a value there, and there is I don't want to say independence. There's been a big story about independent media over the last couple of weeks that's interesting, and I don't think that we're going to have the time to talk about it, and I haven't really looked enough into it to discuss it. But we're not, independent media. We are labor media. We are funded by unions and the labor movement, and we are part of unions and the labor movement. We are both members of unions. We are both leaders in our unions and in the labor movement. And so we're not independent. We see ourselves as part of the organized working class, a collective of people that are trying to build power for workers, and having media that is beholden to those interests rather than beholden to the companies and the people who make money because they have money, whose money is what makes them money. We are not beholden to that. Basically every other media, anywhere else that you get your news from, whether that's talk radio or whether that's CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, all of those folks are beholden to corporations and political donors who are rich because they are rich, who make money because they have money. Okay? We're not going to tell you that we're independent, but we are beholden to workers and to unions and the labor movement. And I think even if you want to discount a little bit what we have to say because we are beholden to working people and unions and the labor movement, that's fine. We have a bias and we admit that bias. But it is a counter bias to literally everything else. And I think that is what makes our project a little bit different, and why we focus so much on, unions and working people stories rather than, what is the, what's the politics thing that's happening right now. And we lose a lot of audience for that, right? I mean, we could be, I see other YouTube channels and I see other media projects that kind of comment that their thing is commenting on the latest political thing. And
the news cycle of the day.
Yeah,
right?
The news cycle of the day.
That the media itself creates, and
Right.
then they all comment on each other, right, to generate more content.
Yes. And And we don't do that, and maybe we should do more of it. And I'm not saying it's bad to do that, because, you can do that in a way, and you can catch the algorithm, and you can ride the wave in such a way, and while you're doing that, you can put in education and push people more towards the politics that you think are valuable. But we don't do that very much. It's very rare that we do that. And I see other other media projects that have a significantly higher following. But we hope that our relentless focus on the stories of working people over the stories of the people who are in power is a valuable counterweight to everything else that you hear. And so, why is labor media important? I think that's why.
Right. And there's a lot I would add to that, but I would just, before I do that, I wanted to ask you really, and you spoke to some of the impact of what this project has done, and I'm curious what kind of feedback we've gotten from listeners and guests that is worth sharing with folks, and also just looking back over the last few years, whether it's the past year or the whole 5+ years we've been on the air, are there examples or stories, that we've brought to the air that you don't think would have otherwise gotten any coverage?
I'll say that as far as the feedback that we get, that I'm most proud of course, we get a lot of feedback, and there are people that send us emails, and there are people that leave us voicemails, and some of which we don't play on the air, obviously, and we don't respond on the air because a lot of it is sensitive, and people, but the things that I most enjoy, because it's what the project is about, is when people reach out to us and tell us that we have inspired them to build a union in their workplace, to take power for themselves and their coworkers and fight back against literally the tyranny of the boss. I say that the workplace is a dictatorship and your boss is a tyrant, and people say that that's kind of that might feel hyperbolic, but it's not. It's not hyperbolic. And so when people take those steps to try to take the power that they have, I think that's super gratifying to see that. When people tell us that they have decided to become a steward in their union, when people tell us that they have, joined the negotiating committee, when we have inspired people to action, that's the kind of feedback that I most value. And, stories or conversations that we've, brought to light over the last 5 years that might not, you just literally go to any week, and we're having a union member or an officer talk to us about their latest contract negotiation. A couple of weeks ago, we had the IBEW Local 136 on to talk about their most recent contract negotiation. Literally nowhere else. There was no other outlet that talked about how electricians in Birmingham are getting a 12% raise and their first-year apprentices are getting something like a 20% raise. The union electricians in Birmingham, obviously not the non-union electricians in Birmingham. Literally no other outlet in the state of Alabama had that story, because they don't know these people. They don't even know to look for the stories, right? And so those are the kinds of things that that you get here on the Valley Labor Report that you're literally not going to get anywhere else. And then last week in Southern Labor, we have, several stories like that all the time. One about how, and we didn't, and I think we're going to have these nursing home workers on the program here in a couple of weeks. I've been talking to the union about trying to make this happen, but nursing home workers in Pell City, Alabama, just unionized. That was in last week in Southern Labor, and they just finished negotiating their first contract. That was in last week in Southern Labor. You're going to get small headline stories like that again, either we have pulled from the unions themselves, or we found other news websites reporting on that, and we give you kind of like a labor roundup. But a lot of times, again, it's stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else, because no other outlet reported on the Pell City nursing home workers who unionized and at Diversicare and negotiated their first contract.
Yeah. There's so much more we could get into in terms of why we do what we do, and why this is important. And I just want to encourage listeners to really think about how you can participate in this project, how you can be a supporter of this project, because we want to consider y'all as part of this work, as partners in building a stronger labor movement, not just consumers of content. and whatever you can do is appreciated. Whether that is chipping in a few bucks every month or once a year or as you're able, whether that's liking and sharing and subscribing to the content, getting the word out, talking to your coworkers, talking to your fellow union members, your friends, your neighbors, sharing with your social networks. That really does go a long way. We appreciate it. And I just want to thank all of y'all sincerely, who do listen, who do subscribe, who share, who donate, who spread the word. Your support is how we do this and why we do this. To amplify the voices of the working class, especially here in the American South, to try to spread a message of collective action, diverse people power, and working class solidarity. The labor movement right now is in a fight for its life, and we have to be honest about that. And building our own working class media is a small part, but an important part of how we can win, how we can fight back. So we can't do it without you. Please stand with us. We appreciate your support. Go to tvlr.fm/donate if you want to chip in a few bucks. It will go a long way. We truly appreciate it. While you're there, check out the shop, subscribe to the newsletters. We're asking all of you who listen to be part of this project, to help us grow this project. If not now, then when? If not you, then who? So let's see how far we can take this thing together. And I'm wishing everyone a happy Labor Day.
Absolutely. Did our guest for 945 confirm? Is he going to be able to make it?
I actually just missed a call from him during that segment. So
all right.
Let's see. Let's see if we can get him on the air.
He not have the Zoom link?
He should have the Zoom link.
Zoom can be confusing for folks sometimes.
Yeah, if Jeffrey doesn't see him in the Zoom room.
Yeah, we're not seeing him. Yeah, well, I'll just keep riffing on this, and you can give him a call. You can step into another room if you need to. I really do appreciate folks that are tuning in, and I also want to say, we've gone through kind of like what our budget looks like on programs before, and I'll just say like super briefly, our biggest expense, like by far, is our, the way that we are on the radio is like paid programming, right? So we basically, buy a couple of hours on the weekend, and that's where that's where most of the money goes, and we think that is valuable. And that's where most people that listen to us, actually. Most people that listen to us do not find us online. Most people that listen to us on the radio. We are on 5 stations in 3 states, Alabama, Tennessee, and Louisiana. Most of those stations are in Alabama, in Huntsville, Muscle Shoals, and Montgomery. And, we think that there's a lot of value there because there is still a lot of people that get their news from the radio, like just the good old-fashioned radio. And so being like where people are, right, is such an important value in the labor movement. When you're organizing a union, you're trying to meet people where they are. And so we are trying to kind of be a media project in that spirit. And so that's why we do, request donations so often, is because it does cost money to be on the radio. And then, as we have gotten bigger, being on 5 stations in 3 states, we do have more people that are part of the project, and we have, we try to pay people that are part of the project. I am still volunteer. I'm the only person now involved in the project who does not get money from the project. So you are not making me rich by by donating to the Valley Labor Report at tvlr.fm/donate, but you are helping us pay people that do work for us $22 an hour. Not bad, I don't think, for part-time work. So that's super helpful. And as I think about like what the project could become, I would like to see us on more stations. I would like to see us on the air across the state, across the South, in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, all of the states that we kind of think of as the South, we would love to be on the air there. And something that you could help us do getting on the air in these is help us get on the air in these states, right? If you have a station that you listen to a lot that you think would air the Valley Labor Report, then reach out to that station and say, hey, there's this really cool program that you should run. If they would run it for free, that would be even better. We are on a community station in New Orleans that runs the program for free, and we're super thankful for that. So yeah, consider doing that. If you're listening to us online and we're not on the air in your area, then think about how you can help us get on the air there.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate all the support we've gotten from folks across the South. And, there are community radio stations out there, college radio stations out there. There's a lot of untapped markets. Something we've bounced around is the idea of Spanish language content and working with brothers and sisters to put out Spanish language labor media, which is really something that we need desperately here in the South. So, there's a ton of opportunity, a ton of potential to grow this thing, to make it bigger and better and stronger. And we appreciate the feedback that we get from people, whether that's critical, supportive, whatever it may be. We want to do this so it's entertaining, so it's educational, it's, engaging. We do it so that it really can help empower working people. And I'm like you, Jacob. I've heard stories of folks who actually joined their union after hearing about it on the show, right? Like there was a worker down in southern Alabama who really had never heard that there was a union at their workplace until they heard about it on the Valley Labor Report. Now, we could talk about why that is, and maybe there's some kind of disconnect happening in the workplace. But the fact is that worker heard about it, joined their union. They're now an active union member, involved in trying to grow their local and build their local. So, that's why we do this. And, Labor Day is a great time to kind of do some reflecting and thinking about how far we've come, how far we have to go. We do it really, really grassroots. This is, we're not media professionals, right? As Jacob said, we're union members, we're union leaders, we work other jobs. We do this on the side as a passion project, and it's really been cool to see how far it has come, and the amazing people we have talked to, and the amazing conversations we've had. I was speaking with some young people this week about this project a little bit, and because a lot of young people have ideas of being YouTubers and social media stars. So I was giving them a little bit of a reality check on it, but also I did share that how cool is it that we can email almost anyone in the world and say, hey, we've got a talk show. Do you want to come on it? And sometimes it actually works, right? We have talked to some amazing people, rank and file workers that are in our community that you never hear in the media otherwise. Union leaders and organizers. So that's why we do it. We appreciate all the support. Again, go to tvlr.fm/donate if you want to chip in. And our guest, Dr. Robert White, he had some technical difficulties getting in the Zoom. His email was blocking it, but I think we've got him in the Zoom now. So we'll have to keep it real short. We do have a hard break at 10, but I'm really excited to have Dr. Robert White on the air.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So I brought you on because y'all are doing something really cool in Montgomery next weekend, a Labor in the Pulpit event. So could you just tell us a little bit about what y'all have going on down there?
Sure. The River Region Labor Council is having an event, and we're calling it Politics, the Pulpit, and Labor, and really Labor in the Pulpit. And it's going to be at Montgomery City of Refuge Church on September the 7th at 4 o'clock. And we're going to have pastors and union leaders and labor organizers just to come and to have a discussion on the role that the church can play in building up the working people of the River Region and the Black Belt of Alabama. We also have a co-sponsor, which is a radio show that we produced last year, and it's been running for about a year now, and it's called Lunch with Labor. And our motto is the scripture that says, if we don't work, we don't eat. So what we're doing is we're building up the labor movement. We're energizing the church, which is primarily, filled with working people. And we're going to
Right.
talk about working conditions. We're going to talk about being the best employee and employer we can be. We're going to talk about organizing in our best interest. We're going to encourage those who come to seek employment, seek training, seek education, and all of those positive things that make for a healthy economic and spiritual environment.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited. I appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to attending myself. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think these kinds of conversations around faith and labor are so important? I mean, especially right now in the environment we're in.
Well, because so much of the Bible is an encouragement to those who work with their hands. And the scriptures are clear, about the mandate that we work and that we find value in our labor and in our family and in identifying ourselves with those gifts and talents that God has given us. And so the church has been and has always been a supporter of labor, especially in Alabama, because working class people. And we're, as a pastor and other pastors, are interested in the overall health of their parishioners, their congregations, and their families. And if you have a strong worker commitment and you have a strong business commitment, then you have a healthier community. And we're able to bring up topics and discussions that sometimes are left out, of other environments. So energizing the church and the opening up our doors and saying, listen, we want to encourage our organizations to continue to push for better jobs, better working conditions, better benefits, and to establish objective ways of evaluating our labor, because the scripture says that a laborman is worthy of his hire. And so all of those things are important. And we just want everyone to come out and listen. It's not going to be any kind of shouting sessions or argument sessions or anything like that. But we're going to just simply teach biblical principles and show, the community that, hey, we're interested in what happens to the working class people of Alabama.
Amen. Amen. I really, really appreciate it and commend all of you involved in pulling off this event. Again, it's next Sunday in Montgomery. That is September 7th. And I really appreciate that you are taking a stand. Your brothers and sisters involved in this effort are taking a stand. It's really important that labor folks, faith communities, that we're talking to each other, we're working together in our people's best interest. Because we deserve better, and working together is how we're going to achieve that. Dr. White, was there anything else you wanted to say before we let you go?
Yeah, I just want to just say again that the event will be held at 3820 Woodley Road, which is in Montgomery, Alabama, and will be beginning at 4 p.m. and the public is invited. And the name of the church is actually my church, Montgomery City of Refuge, and we'll have our meeting in our fellowship hall, and we want everyone to come out and listen. Refreshments will be given, and we'll have different speakers to come and just to bring words of encouragement, because a lot of our people need encouragement. And if you're working in a hostile work environment, or if you just don't feel like you're being done right, and you feel like you're by yourself, and it's pretty discouraging when you work so hard and you end up being mistreated or not being appreciated like you ought to. So we just want to encourage you, to continue to move forward and continue to be the best that God would have you to be. So that's going to be next Sunday, 3820 Woodley Road, Montgomery City of Refuge.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Robert White. Really appreciate your time. Sorry we didn't have more time to talk with you, but looking forward to seeing you next weekend and looking forward to meeting more folks and gathering together, building that community. So thank you again for coming on the Valley Labor Report today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to be right back. We're going to talk to Barry Eidlin, a Canadian labor expert, about a flight attendant strike up north of the border. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. This is the Valley Labor Report from the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we just wrapped up a conversation with a Montgomery minister about their Labor in the Pulpit event that's going to be happening next Saturday. Next Sunday, sorry. We also been talking a little bit about the project, why we do what we do, why labor media is important. If you missed that, you can find the stream on Facebook and YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. We're about to talk to a Canadian labor expert about a strike by flight attendants in Canada, and maybe some lessons that might hold for workers in the United States. We're also going to be having some more Labor Day reflections later on in the program. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. If you'd like to call in and give us your thoughts about any of this, 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week at any time, and we might respond to it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want, you can make a one-time or recurring monthly donation at tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. I have to mail out a couple of orders. I'm going to take advantage of Labor Day and do some labor and mail out some, prepare some packaging for folks who have ordered some stuff over the last couple of weeks. tvlr.fm/store. You can buy our shirts, hats, or stickers. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then folks, think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You know, our largest single source of funding comes from our listeners, but the majority of the funding comes from unions, from, different unions giving a little bit here and there. $100 a month sponsorship, a $50 a month sponsorship, a $500 a month sponsorship, or more. We're not going to tell you not to give us more money as a union. So if you are a local union in Alabama, Tennessee, or Louisiana, or you're an international union with locals in that area, then think about sponsoring the program. There are so few. Like, we literally talked to one of the people who do the only other union radio program in the 3 states where we are on the radio. There are no other union radio programs in Alabama, Tennessee, or Louisiana besides us and that one program in Montgomery. So, kind of a unique value proposition here for the labor movement. So reach out to us, tvlr.fm/contact.
Well, good morning, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we do want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. We're going to get to last week in Southern labor really quick, and then we're going to be talking to Barry Eidlin. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from August 22nd to August 29th. In new union campaigns, 14 workers at Starbucks in Madisonville, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 17 more at a location in Paducah, Kentucky. Workers, likely pushed by their employer, filed a petition to decertify Workers United as the union representing 21 workers at Rare Bird Coffee in Falls Church, Virginia. 7 workers at Texas New Mexico Power Company in Alvin, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 66. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Communication Workers of America, CWA, as the union representing 11 workers at Jewish Family Services of St. Louis in St. Louis, Missouri. 10 workers at Sunbelt Rentals in Louisville, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 181. Workers likely pushed by their employer and with help from the freaks at the National Right to Work Foundation filed a petition to decertify the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA, Local 421, as the union representing 43 workers at Environmental Air Systems in High Point, North Carolina. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Coquille Del Mar Workers Union as the union representing 5 workers at Coquille Del Mar in San Juan, Puerto Rico. In campaign updates, 1,200 workers at Blue Oval SK in Glendale, Kentucky, voted 526 to 515 in favor of unionization with the United Auto Workers, UAW, but 41 ballots were contested because the union says they're not part of the bargaining unit. Those challenged ballots are determinative, and the eligibility of those ballots will be decided by the NLRB and will ultimately decide the outcome unless Ford decides to drop their contest. The UAW said in a statement that they are calling on Ford to acknowledge the democratic decision of its workforce. They should immediately drop their anti-democratic effort to undermine the outcome of the election and recognize a majority of Blue Oval SK's production and maintenance employees have chosen to join the UAW and ensure battery jobs in Kentucky are good, safe union jobs. There were a few election withdrawals, one of them being a union election at Shangri-La by 15 workers in Columbia, Missouri. They had previously petitioned to have a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 655. They withdrew that petition for a union election. In strikes and bargaining updates, workers at the Epcot Italy Pavilion in Disney World, Orlando, who are unionized with Unite Here, Local 737, are in the middle of contract negotiations as their current agreement expires on September 30th. They are demanding an $8 an hour raise over 3 years, free health care, and a pension plan. They will be holding a strike authorization vote soon, with announcement of the vote to come on September 10th. The American Train Dispatchers Association, ATDA, reached a tentative first collective bargaining agreement for members from the Genesee and Wyoming Railroad. Workers there unionized in September of 2024. The new contract will include an average raise of 13% immediately upon ratification, then another across-the-board increase of 7% just a few months later on January 1st, 2026. Along with seniority-based job bidding, order of call, the right to appeal discipline, and more. According to the union, workers will be voting on the new tentative agreement over the coming weeks. Cherokee County in Georgia, their fire and emergency services boosted their minimum staffing from 2 firefighters per apparatus to 3 after the firefighters union Local 4047 leaders spent years pushing for the change. 3-person staffing began on August 17th using about 40 new firefighters from 2 recent recruit classes. They will be spread among 22 fire stations across the county and bring the total number of firefighters close to 500. In political and legislative updates, employees at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, wrote a public letter to Congress outlining concerns with the administration's handling of the agency, including the fact that the head of agency does not have the legally required expertise. It's part of the law after Katrina that the person heading FEMA have experience in emergency management. Staff at FEMA wrote a letter saying in part that it's bad that the administration is violating the law. They also said they're concerned about the huge decrease in personnel and funding cuts. For speaking out against the administration's actions, they have been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, like workers at the Environmental Protection Agency who signed a similar letter before them. Those employees have now been fired at the EPA for speaking out against the actions of the government. Literal First Amendment violations from the free speech people who are supportive of this administration are just so silly and not serious. You know, I mean, if you voted for this administration because you value free speech and you're not speaking out against the daily incursions upon the right of people to speak freely in this country, then I know that you are a liar. In July, the Trump administration released their AI action plan. Henry Wu writes that this plan treats workers as soon-to-be casualties of disruption rather than co-creators in a new economy. The Trump administration fired Robert Primus, a member of the Surface Transportation Board, STB, a federal agency that regulates railroads, after he announced his public concerns with the proposed merger between Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. The Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Union, SMART, issued a statement condemning the firing as the Trump administration doing corporate America's bidding and called on the White House to reinstate him. Primus was originally appointed by Trump and then reappointed by Biden and confirmed by the Senate both times. Republican state senators in Alabama are now concerned about the impacts to the state budget from Trump's budget law. It's going to increase the cost the state pays for food stamps alone by tens of millions of dollars. A quick fix would be to increase taxes on the wealthiest Alabamians, but that won't happen. We were a little light on Last Week in Southern Labor this week, so if we missed anything, please let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in next week's roundup. Now, we have on the line Barry Eidlin, former union organizer and current associate professor of sociology at McGill University in Canada. Barry, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Good to be back, Jacob, and we're not yet the 51st state, so
that's right. That's right.
For what it's worth.
It's great to talk to you. I'm really excited about this conversation. The Air Canada flight attendant strike was such a huge, I think, like really, really important story. And it's kind of, at least in the States, it's kind of gone overlooked, despite what I see as, I mean, this is like a really, really big thing that happened here. And so there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. But even before that, you know, we're on the radio in in Alabama, Tennessee, and Louisiana, and New Orleans, literally almost as far away from Canada as you could get and still be in the United States. And so there are going to be people who are in the audience who are like, why should I care what happens in Canada? You know, like it's not in a bad way, not in like, oh, you know, I don't care. You know, I'm sure that, you know, listeners are like, oh, it would be great for flight attendants in Canada to make more money, and that's fine. But like, how is it valuable for me to be hearing about this? Why should I care what happens to workers in other countries? Why is, international solidarity something that is important and valuable?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I just did want to say, because I'm particularly excited about this, that my faculty union at McGill just formed last year, and we just got our T-shirts. So I decided that I was mark the occasion by wearing our new union swag. It's really
incredible.
Exciting. But back to the question. There's a lot to unpack there, and so there's the broader solidarity question about why should workers care about workers in other countries, and there's a philosophical dimension to that. But that's probably a bigger question for another discussion. I think here it's much more concrete, right? Because Canadian and American labor unions are so tightly intertwined. It's actually one of the few places in the world where you actually have workers. So as your listeners probably know, a lot of American unions are called internationals, right? And the reason that they're called internationals is because they have locals in Canada. And Canada's one of the few countries in the world where a large portion of union members are members of unions that are the parent headquarter is located outside of their country. So the Canadian and American labor movements have been tightly intertwined for as long as both labor movements have existed, right? US and Canadian workers have crossed the borders, and they are literally part of the same unions. In this case, with Air Canada, that's not the case. It's one of the unions called the Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE. But the Teamsters, the SEIU, Workers United, ATU, the transit workers, a lot of the rail unions. So like there's a lot of cross-border integration, really, still. And
well, and I mean, it's basically every building trade union, right? I mean, and building trade unions are really typically seen as like the more conservative, and they are the more conservative among the unions. And so it's interesting that most of the building trades unions, the electrical workers, the iron workers, the sheet metal workers, all of these, all of these unions, they're international. They have members in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And so I think there's this there's this direct connection, and then there's a lot of similarity, just in part because of that, that between the two countries, and the laws in a lot of ways are similar. The Canadian labor relations framework, or whatever you want to call it, a lot of it is literally cut and paste from the Wagner Act. It's changed over time. That's part of what my research is about. But the framework is basically very similar in a lot of important ways. And so to get back to the original question, so why should we care? I mean, so beside the fact that we should care about worker struggles around the world, I think what happens in Canada has a lot of lessons that we can draw in the US as well. And so I think the fact that you had this strike under a very tightly regulated labor regime that really restricts the right to strike in important ways in Canada, and this worker defiance, it sort of provides an example that is reasonable for US workers to look at and say, like, oh, we could be more like that, as opposed to, say, I mean, not to put any shade on them, but something like Sweden or something like that, where sure, like we should be more like Sweden, and have like 70-80% union density, but there's a lot of steps that you have to get to that get to that point. There's this really fundamentally different historical trajectory that Sweden followed that the U.S. and Canada did not, whereas the US and Canada share a lot of political economic similarities, such that what workers do in one country is more portable, shall we say, to workers across the border.
I like it. That's a great answer. Thank you very much for that. And I agree with all of it. Co-sign it. So tell us what are the facts on the ground? Like, why, strikes don't just happen just randomly, right? They happen because there are disagreements between labor and management. So can you explain that the situation before the new tentative agreement that flight attendants were able to secure after their strike? What were the disagreements between management and the union? How long had they been negotiating, stuff like that?
Yeah. So as with almost all strikes, this was a very long time coming. They've been in negotiation since early this year. And the fundamental issue was this issue of ground pay. One of the big wins of the strike is just making more people aware of the fact that flight attendants are only getting paid when the plane's wheels are up and they're off the ground. As soon as the plane touches the ground, they're off the clock. And so all the work, and before they take off, they're off the clock. So all the work they're doing safety checks, getting passengers loaded on, handling ornery passengers who didn't get the seat they wanted, finding space in the overhead bins, checking checking luggage, gate checking luggage. That's all off the clock. And that's been a longstanding practice in the industry, and this has been a practice in the US as well, it still is. And this was the moment where CUPE decided that this was going to be they were going to make a move to get rid of this arcane, outdated and profoundly unjust practice that wouldn't be allowed in pretty much any other context, right? You should, I mean, this concept of you should be paid for when you're on the clock should resonate with people. Right. And so that was really the big sticking point. And because it's such a long-standing practice, Air Canada management was not having it and really dug in their heels. There was also just the issue, the second sort of related problem, also related to cost of just being able to make ends meet, is that CUPE flight attendants had been working under a 10-year agreement. They had signed their last contract 10 years ago, and what that meant was that the wage increases that they had negotiated 10 years ago had been completely eroded by the inflationary spike that we saw coming out of the pandemic. And so you had a lot of flight attendants falling behind, and particularly the junior flight attendants. And so they were really focused on this issue of ground pay and on trying to bring up the bottom for particularly junior flight attendants. And so Air Canada management was obviously digging in their heels, and they had been negotiating for months. And it basically started coming down to the wire. The flight attendants took a strike authorization vote. They got a 99.7% yes vote with something, I believe, over 90% turnout. This was a highly mobilized, highly angry bunch of flight attendants by this point. But the Air Canada management really didn't seem to care, and they refused to budge. And then it basically got down to the point where where CUPE gave a 72-hour strike notice. And at that point, the way that's supposed to work, in sort of collective bargaining, in the collective bargaining world, like in the textbook version, is that that's supposed to provide the pressure to get the parties to the bargaining table to hammer out their differences and hammer out an agreement, right? But what happened was the opposite. Air Canada management released a press release after the strike notice saying, we're at impasse, we're walking away from the table, and calling on the Canadian federal government to invoke this arcane part of the Canada Labour Code known as Section 107, which had been invoked multiple times. This was the 6th time in the past 2 years that the government invoked it. And they'd done this to intervene in rail, in port. The Air Canada pilots, they had almost done it. WestJet mechanics, it's another airline. And so they basically, Air Canada management was banking on a Section 107 back to work order. And so they walked away from the table. And so the strike happened 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. And by noon, what was previously called the labor minister, now called the jobs minister, issued a Section 107 back to work order. The difference here, and why I'm probably on your show, is that rather than go back to work, as Section 107 provides for, the CUPE flight attendants defied the order and said, basically, they basically had big rallies the following day at airports around the country chanting, "Forced to fly, we won't comply." And so that put management and the federal government in a bit of a pickle because they didn't know what to do. And basically, once, I guess, it sent the message to the Air Canada management that the strike was real. They weren't going back to work. They were going to have to deal with it. And so they came back to the bargaining table and did that round-the-clock bargaining, and they hammered out an agreement, I believe, around 4:40 a.m. on Tuesday. So they had the strike. They defied on Sunday, Monday negotiated, and then by early on Tuesday morning, there was an agreement. So that's sort of the course of events.
That's really incredible. And just to remind folks who are listening on the radio, we are talking to Barry Eidlin, a former union organizer and associate professor of sociology at McGill University in Canada, about the recent Air Canada flight attendants strike. So they've been negotiating for a while, and that a 10-year contract over the course of the pandemic, where you have this cost of living crisis, is, you can imagine, folks who are listening, just the immense strain that's going to place on the members, and their willingness to take action. And so they voted to strike, overwhelming, almost unanimity from the members in their willingness to strike, and they gave that strike notice, and the government said, don't do it, that's illegal. And so then they were faced with the choice of following the law or breaking the law and striking, and they chose to strike, and that is incredible. And like you said, I'm interested. You wrote a piece for the Daily Globe and Mail, I think is the name of the outlet, and the majority of that piece touched on the importance of the strike in making negotiations meaningful. The fact that the strike is really the only leverage that workers have in contract negotiations. Yeah. Employers have so many levers that they can pull to try to pressure workers to accept a crappy deal. And workers have basically one lever that we can pull to exert any real power, and that is the strike. Can you talk to us some about why that is so important, and how actually governments in Canada and the United States restricting the right to strike further actually does the opposite of what they wanted to do, because they restrict the right to strike because they want workers to keep working, and they want commerce to flow and blah blah blah. But making it more difficult to do that is actually like detrimental to a good state of labor relations. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so let's take that in two parts. First, the role of the strike in collective bargaining, and second of all, why the sort of policy response of the government ended up backfiring over time. So as I say in the piece in the Globe and Mail, which is a big national newspaper in Canada, in order for collective bargaining to function, just in any sort of meaningful sense, and in order for it to be actual bargaining, the parties need to meet on something like a level playing field. Obviously, as your listeners are intensely aware, I'm sure, there's never going to be a true level playing field between workers and bosses. But you need to try to level the playing field as much as possible. And that means that each side needs some leverage over the other, right? I mean, collective bargaining exists because we're dealing with tough issues at the bargaining table where there are fundamentally different interests, and these are hard issues to resolve. If they were easy, we wouldn't need collective bargaining, because you'd just meet and you'd agree and then you'd get on with your life. So collective bargaining, there needs to be a degree of leverage, of compulsion, of power dynamics, basically, in collective bargaining. That's sort of fundamental to how collective bargaining works. And as you just said, right, if you're thinking about leverage, employers have lots of levers to pull in terms of their ability to control their workers, in terms of their ability to discipline them, in terms of their ability to fire them, in terms of their ability to threaten them in ways and that have meaning, right? I mean, when your employer threatens you, you have good reason to take that threat seriously because of the power they have over you. And workers basically have that one lever, which is the power to withhold our labor. And so that is the one lever we have to try as best as possible to level the playing field such that the employer actually will come to the table and will negotiate and will sign an agreement. And so anything that undermines, weakens, impedes that meaningful right to strike will have the effect of undermining the whole collective bargaining process because it removes the employer's incentive to come to the table and actually reach an agreement. And we saw that very explicitly in the Air Canada strike. And the CEO of Air Canada, after the tentative agreement was reached, was interviewed by BNN Bloomberg News and was basically asked, like, didn't you have a backup plan for if the workers defied the order? And he would for if the workers went on strike. And his response was basically, well, we assumed that the government would issue a Section 107 back to work order. And then we didn't anticipate that the union would disobey. And so that was sort of how we planned. And it didn't work. So basically you can see in his words that they had no plan to meaningfully bargain because they expected that the federal government would step in to rescue them, essentially. And it was only when it became clear to management that they weren't going to get a get out of jail free card, and that the government wasn't coming to the rescue, that they actually came to the table. Okay, so that's sort of the why the right to strike is important for collective bargaining to work at all. Then we have this separate issue of sorry, what was it? It was about the
government's trying to restrict the right to strike, and why that might actually like go counter to their stated purpose of even restricting the right to strike.
Yes, I'm sorry I'm growing into the absent-minded professor trope with every passing day. Anyway, yes, the sort of what social scientists call this process of policy learning, right? So basically, in Canada, governments have a long history of trying to restrict the right to strike in the interest. And so when you think about policy and how it's supposed to work, in the abstract, right? You're supposed to, government officials, politicians, whatever, are supposed to have some sort of policy goal in mind, right? And then you basically figure out, okay, well, what rules do we need to design? What policies do we need to put in place to achieve that goal? And for Canadian politicians and government leaders, when it came to labor, the overarching policy goal was labor peace. They wanted to basically, as you said, keep workers working, and they didn't want to have conflict in the workplace. And so they tried designing policies to achieve that policy goal. And when workers started mobilizing in a more serious way, there's a long history, just as in the US, you can go back way into the 19th century of workers organizing and picket line violence and all that stuff. But as in the US, you had this sort of upsurge in the 1930s. But whereas in the US, as many of your listeners probably know, the response to the worker upsurge starting, in 1934 was when it really blew up, was the Wagner Act, was the National Labor Relations Act. So you had Roosevelt and the New Deal, and their idea was, okay, we've got this upsurge. We're going to basically essentially co-opt this upsurge by providing certain rights and to incorporate labor into the New Deal coalition as an important partner to as part of our political coalition. And that had its pluses and minuses. I've written extensively about that, but that was the response. It was like, okay, we have this worker upsurge. We're going to basically create a framework for establishing a set of labor rights that were encoded in the Wagner Act. In Canada, the Prime Minister at the time looked out at the labor upsurge happening and gave a speech where he vowed to crush the worker upsurge under the iron heel of ruthlessness. So, and sent out some of your listeners, even if they're far away from Canada, might be familiar with the Mounties. There's like that cartoon Dudley Do-Right, and they have those red jackets and those funny hats.
The RCMP, right?
Yes, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian
I actually
Canadian Mounted
here's a
Police.
fun thing. My wife's has like an uncle or something who was a member of the RCMP. So
small world.
Yes, small world. Okay. So anyway, those Mounties.
He might have been one of them.
Icon. Yeah. Were sent out to bust up picket lines, and there was a big, rally that was like taking a train across the country to meet in Ottawa in 1935, and they were beaten up by the Mounties in Regina, Saskatchewan. Anyway, there's all these stories I could get into, but the point being that there was repression. That's the big point. There's this repressive response to labor upsurge, and that continued for about 10 years, right? And basically, the idea, even when so that the Iron Heel of Ruthlessness guy was part of the Conservative Party, but then even when the Liberals came to power, it was this guy William Lyon Mackenzie King who actually came back to power. It's a longer story, but he was like an industrial relations expert guy, like that. Like he actually went to Harvard, wrote a dissertation on labor relations, blah blah blah. So he personally, cared a lot about workers' rights and stuff, but there was this overarching policy goal of containing industrial conflict, and so even he, when faced with actual labor conflict, the knee-jerk response was to just tighten the screws, to just continually try to tamp down and restrict the right to strike. But as you got into, so now we're into the 1940s, into World War II, and every time that the government tried restricting the right to strike, it just inflamed industrial conflict, both because on the employer side, it's that same dynamic I was talking about earlier, where the employers had no incentive to bargain because they knew that the government was just going to come and force workers back to work. And then, as you might well imagine, it stoked considerable resentment amongst workers to have the government busting up their strikes all the time. And so it had this inflammatory effect on labor conflict. So it was going against the policy goal of the government. And it got to the point in 1943 where the strike wave was so broad that it was impeding wartime production. It was literally impeding the government's ability to fight in World War II against the Nazis. And then on top of that, you had what had been for the past few years a fairly marginal nascent labor party called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation that in 1943 had this huge electoral breakthrough in the province of Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada, and the industrial heartland of Canada. And so you had this labor left party that was now threatening the Liberal government from the left, from its left flank, and an industrial strike wave that was threatening the government's ability to prosecute World War II. And those combined to finally get the government to cave and realize this strategy we have is not achieving our policy goal. And it is actually backfiring. And what we need to do in order to achieve our policy goal of industrial peace is to create a framework in which to contain industrial conflict. And part of that had to be a meaningful right to strike. And so they crafted, like I said, a Wagner-based framework that was somewhat more restrictive when it came to the right to strike, but allowed for workers to have a meaningful right to strike because they realized that they had to have workers' ability to strike and they had to be able to compel employers to come to the table. And that's the framework that worked. And then over the course of the post-war, you had these periodic moments where you had flare-ups of industrial conflict, and the government's response was to strengthen collective bargaining rather than tamping down industrial conflict. And so in the 1960s, you had the expansion of public sector unionism, and the government granted, incorporated into the law, unlike in the US, a robust right to strike similar to the private sector. So you basically, and the prime minister at the time, Lester B. Pearson, who's the guy after whom the Toronto airport is named, actually, incidentally. So where a lot of the picketing was happening with the CUPE strike, basically said, if workers feel that the government is prohibiting their right to strike, government may be precipitating the very conditions it's trying to avoid. He literally said that.
Right.
And so basically there's this process of policy learning where the government sort of, tried to, restrict the right to strike, realize it backfired, and basically realized you had to have that. And it culminated actually in 2015, something where Canada now differs from the US, in the Supreme Court of Canada issuing a decision that declared that the right to strike is a constitutionally protected right that is part of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is the Canadian Constitution. So there's now a constitutional right to strike. The problem now is that you have governments that engage in what these labor scholars, Leo Panitch and Donald Swartz, call permanent exceptionalism, which is now there is this lip service to the importance of collective bargaining and labor rights and the right to strike until a strike actually happens. And then for whatever reason, because it's, too costly or, too inconvenient or too disruptive, we have to take action just this once. But of course, when justice once becomes every time, you no longer have a right to strike. And so that's what was happening with Section 107.
And we saw that
permanent exceptionalism. Yeah.
Right. And we saw, this situation really put to lie the idea that this is valuable for maintaining labor peace, because within literally hours of the flight attendants saying that, no, we're going to ignore the back to work order, and somebody in the chat said that the president of the union literally ripped the back to work order up during a press conference, which was really cool. They had a tentative agreement, which is really great. And so what was in the tentative agreement, and how are folks reacting? And we've gone a little long, and I apologize for that. We've got like maybe 5 minutes left, so the last couple of questions we're going to have to get to pretty quickly.
It was really only when the flight attendants, the president of the union ripped up the agreement, that we saw the company come back to the table. I think since we're short on time, it's important to recognize here the follow-up, which is also an important lesson it has some important lessons for American workers, which is that the tentative agreement that was reached actually fell short in a lot of important ways. And a lot of the provisions in the tentative agreement were basically not subject to member ratification. So the only part that members were allowed to vote on was the wage package. And if the wage package gets rejected, which we'll know on September 6th, it goes to arbitration. So there's no way that they can go back on strike. And so the provisions around this ground pay issue, they didn't win full ground pay. What they won was 60 minutes or 70 minutes, depending on the size of the aircraft, of ground pay, paid at 50% of their wage, going up to 70% by the end of the 4-year agreement. So it comes up short, and looks very likely that the flight attendants, even though they can't fully reject the agreement, will vote to reject.
Wow.
We'll know on September 6th, but it looks highly likely. And I mean, we can debate why that is. Clearly, the QP leadership was worried about further government repression, government fines,
Right.
whatever other actions. But the fact remains that a lot of flight attendants feel that this agreement did not meet their needs. And this is actually part of a broader pattern that we've seen both in Canada and the US. I think that we've talked a lot about the sort of important rise in strikes, right? And that's happened. It's really happening around the world, but it's certainly been a big part of the story for labor in the US and Canada. But there's another part that hasn't gotten as much airtime that I think is equally important in many ways, which is a rise in workers voting down their contract, or at least much closer contract votes than we've seen previously. And so we've seen a lot of that, in grocery, in ports, in other sectors, in maritime across Canada, but it's also been present in several labor struggles in the US as well. And so this QP negotiation would be part of that broader story as well. And what it shows is that there is this greater energy amongst rank and file union members compared to what we've seen in recent years. Because the interesting thing about these rejections is that previously, when you saw contract rejections, in a significant way, we were talking, 30, 40 years ago, where workers were trying to battle concessions, right? And they were voting down concessionary contracts. What we're seeing now is that workers are voting down their contracts, not because they're inherently bad contracts, like that have literal concessions in them, but because they're not good enough. They don't meet workers' heightened expectations, and they've been heightened because they're mobilizing, right? And so it's been this interesting dynamic where workers are mobilizing more, and that is raising their expectations of what they're capable of and what they deserve.
Right.
And when contracts don't meet those expectations, they reject them.
And I think I think there are some lessons there for workers in the U.S. And the big lesson, and obviously you need to take this within your own context and adjust the lessons as are valuable and helpful. But I think the big lesson is be less constrained. Be less constrained by what the law says you can do, because ultimately the only illegal strike is an unsuccessful one, and that saying comes from the president of PATCO, right? And so I'm not saying go on lots of illegal strikes, but it's true that the only illegal strike is an unsuccessful one, and so folks should these folks in Canada, I think, demonstrated that lesson in a more positive way than the PATCO strike in 1980. So
that's putting it mildly.
Yeah. And so, Barry, really appreciate you taking the time. Last question for you then, 60 seconds. Yeah. J.J. McCullough is a prominent talking head in Canada, and he said, in response to actually some members of the Conservative Party up there supporting the strikers, he said, "Who has the backs of all the hardworking Canadians in danger of missing weddings and funerals and dying relatives? Who has the backs of all the Canadians who want to see the international competition shake up our coddled price gouging industry?" What is the Barry Eidlin response to J.J. McCullough there?
My response, first of all, is that the purpose of a strike is to create a disruption that creates pressure on the employer to come to the bargaining table. The strike is supposed to be disruptive. If it's not disruptive, it's not going to work. Second of all, the Canadian public clearly thought the flight attendants had their back because they backed the strikers overwhelmingly. across party lines. There were 60% that believed that when polled, that they supported the workers' right to strike, even if it created flight delays and disruptions. 90% of Canadians supported their demand of addressing the problem of ground pay. So, JJ McCullough is in a decided minority in looking around for, in wondering who has their back, because most Canadians understood that the flight attendants did have their back, and they were fighting for something that was going to affect all of them.
There we go. JJ McCullough, destroyed by labor expert in Canada. Thank you very much for that. Barry Eidlin, professor of sociology at McGill University. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Great to be here, Jacob. Thanks for having me back.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back to wrap up. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We went long with Barry Idland, and now we're going to have to go already, but we've got a great second half of the program for you. Find us on Facebook and YouTube at the Valley Labor Report. To continue listening to the program, we've got some Labor Day reflections. We've got Boss Watch. We're going to be talking to the National Amazon Director for the Teamsters, Randy Corgan from California. Check out the conversation. If you don't, we appreciate your time listening to us on the radio, and we'll see you next week. Okay, we're off the radio now. Thanks, everybody, for staying tuned. Like I said, folks, we got a great overtime for you. Really excited to talk to Randy Corgan. I think it's going to be a good chat. We're going to have some updates for you about the UAW, too, winning an election in Kentucky. Huge win there, and more. They're striking GE. Also, in Kentucky, lots of stuff popping off in Kentucky. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. We'll take a call if we get one when overtime starts, so stay tuned, folks. We're going to be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party explorer. Which side are you on? Which side are
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. Lots of good stuff there. There were a couple of things that I wanted to... Gus from Portland said, real Labor Day is May Day. That's true, but also what I told him in the chat is that workers are good enough to deserve 2 Labor Days. That's always been my position, there are 2 real Labor Days in the United States, and that's based. That's good. Workers, and that's, you know what? I think somebody should run for president on making a 3rd Labor Day in like January or something. That way all of the Labor Days are equidistant from one another. Big Gucci Sosa says, watching from Dallas, Texas. Appreciate you tuning in. Quirky Geek Girl from Canada. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Barry. Another labor dispute that she pointed to was the teachers in Alberta are facing a lockout. They voted for a strike a few months ago, and talks broke down this week. That is fascinating that the school system would be locking teachers out. Alberta, for those of you who do not know, Canadian political geography is one of the most conservative provinces, the most conservative province in Canada, very much like an Alabama of Canada sort of thing. So that's interesting. Might be worth reaching out to the teachers union there, try to get them on the program sometime. If they do strike, it will be the largest teacher strike in Alberta's history. All the school boards are involved. Bonkers. Brandon says, good morning, fellow workers. I like the subject of today's episode, solidarity from Cincinnati and from the Amazon KCVG Teamsters organizing in Northern Kentucky with Local 89. Hope that the interview that we do with Brother Corgan will be valuable to the work that you're doing over there, Brandon, and I appreciate your support and appreciate your service to the working class. Let's see. William said, I signed up a couple Amazon drivers to join the Teamsters Union. Happy Labor Day. Thank you for your service, William. Brandon mentions UAW 647 on strike right now. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that here in a moment. Gus mentions a cool documentary on the CAW, the Canadian Auto Workers, and its break from the UAW in the early 80s. The final offer is available via Canopy, which you may have access to via your library. So that's something that I want to check out.
And we got a correction. Alberta is more like the Texas of Canada. So that's interesting. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation with Barry earlier, and I do not know a lot of Canadian labor history, so it was interesting to hear more of the background on kind of the differing responses in the 30s labor upsurge. I wasn't aware that Canada, used such repression as opposed to the more like concessionary approach of the FDR administration down here in the States. So that was interesting. I really enjoyed that.
Labor Day is coming up here in a couple of days, and the president of the AFL-CIO, Liz Shuler, released a statement on the state of the unions last week. The AFL-CIO does this in the run-up to every Labor Day. Here is from their press release. President Shuler shared stories from the AFL-CIO's 40-plus city It's Better in a Union Fighting for Freedom, Fairness, and Security bus tour. Her speech included accounts from veterans fired from their federal government jobs and immigrant workers living under the mass deportation agenda. Some of the people deported or detained by ICE include firefighters in California. I mean, absolutely just insane stuff that the administration is doing. as well as the historic union organizing and contract fights across the country. Alabama got a shout out there that those nursing home workers that I mentioned earlier in the program were also mentioned in her State of the Union's address. She described the Trump administration as a government of, by, and for the billionaires and stressed that the Republicans are not going to save us, Democrats are not going to save us, working people are going to save ourselves. The speech also debuted new polling conducted by the AFL-CIO and the David Bender research that found that trust for unions is 20 points higher than trust for either the Democratic or Republican Party. Nearly 2/3 of workers trust unions, while every other major institution, including political parties, the Supreme Court, and religious institutions, are underwater with working people. And among those on the edge voters who are most worried about their ability to make ends meet, raise their families, and retire securely, 75% see unions as their best shot at a decent life and a retirement with dignity. The address also kicks off Workers' Labor Day week of action, during which the labor movement and allies will host nearly 1,000 events across the country in the fight for what workers deserve. So you can check that out on YouTube at the AFL-CIO's YouTube channel. And it is, the headline for her address was the State of the Unions is under attack and fighting back. And under attack is really the name of the game, I think. I mean, just in the last week, we had the Trump administration cancel a wind project that was almost 80% finished. 80% finished, killing 1,000 good-paying union jobs with the stroke of a pen. And so, like I said, we talked about this a little bit last week.
Now, I'm sure all those folks who still love to bring up the Keystone Pipeline
never
are
going to
really
bring that up
concerned
again.
about this, right?
Either they're never going to bring up the Keystone Pipeline again, or they're going to be equally as concerned about this cancellation of this wind project. And it's so short-sighted, even on their own agenda. Because if you look at their, America's AI Action Plan, which I've had to read for work, they really want to see the success of these data center rollouts. The data centers are already consuming something like 1% of all electricity generated in the United States. It's something ridiculous, and that is expected to quadruple over the next 2 or 3 years. And so the idea that we can just cancel wind projects and be able to power these data centers is ridiculous. Trump just eliminated collective bargaining rights for more federal employee unions, including those at NASA and NOAA. And you've got, just in the last week, EPA workers who spoke out against bad actions that the administration was taking being fired. FEMA workers who were speaking out against the illegal actions of the administration. I mean, I didn't realize this. It is the law, and this was passed after Katrina because Katrina was bad. The response to Katrina was terrible. After that, Congress passed a law that said the person who leads FEMA must have experience in emergency response management. The guy who is head of FEMA didn't even know that the United States has a hurricane season. And so that was one of the things that FEMA employees spoke out about in their letter to Congress. And those people have been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. I mean, one of the things about working for the government that is different, supposed to be different than working for the private sector, is that working for the private sector, you can be fired for criticizing, like, the public actions of your company, right? You do not have a free speech right to criticize your company unless it pertains specifically to your working conditions. But, just the company's actions generally, if they're supportive of Black Lives Matter and you don't like that, or vice versa, they're not supportive of Black Lives Matter and you don't like that, you don't have a free speech right to criticize the actions of your company. You have a free speech right to criticize the government, even as a federal employee. You are supposed to. And so, I mean, trampling on free speech rights, trampling on the rights of workers in a union workplace, ripping up contracts, de-recognizing unions. And then the White House has the gall to release this proclamation on for Labor Day, which, I mean, I guess you got to do this for every holiday or whatever. But it's so, reading this literally makes my blood boil. This is the Trump. From the earliest days of our American story, our nation's future has been molded by the skill, determination, and unwavering resilience of the American worker. True. From the earliest settlers, weird, who laid the foundations of a new nation, to the innovators who built our railroads, steel mills, and skyscrapers, America's greatness has always rested in the strength of its workforce. This Labor Day, we honor the proud legacy of America's workforce, and we pay tribute to it. We pay tribute to the unbreakable spirit that keeps it strong 250 years later. The American worker is the beating heart of our economy, the foundation of our strength, and the living embodiment of the American dream. And every honest citizen lives the instinct to work, build, and create, an instinct seen in the welder, the nurse, the trucker, the farmer, and the machinist. Every job, every shift, every hour worked by millions of talented patriots today adds another stone to the foundation of our prosperity. Tragically, in recent decades, a corrupt political class allowed our manufacturing base to decline, our jobs shipped to distant shores, our industries decimated, and our communities weakened, all while building up foreign competitors at the expense of American workers and families. Manufacturing jobs have been lost over the last 3 months at a similar rate as federal government jobs. Just keep that in mind. Those days ended on January 20th, 2025. Every day, my administration is restoring the dignity of labor and putting the American worker first. We are making it easier to buy American and hire American. Not true. Breathing new life into our manufacturing cities. Not true. And securing fair trade deals that protect our jobs and reward our productivity. We're going to be talking to Lori Wallach about the trade stuff next week. We're amassing hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue and ensuring that every product, blah, 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 from our heartland, let's see if there's anything. Yeah, I mean, it's just so, I don't know. The presidents do this for every holiday, but it's so gross to see this as he is attacking workers in the federal government and outside of, building trade members on the wind project. It's so gross to see. It's but Liz Schuler said the state of our union is under attack and fighting back is what we need to do.
That's right.
And so
that's right. And even if you don't have a contract, even if you don't have a recognized union, where two or more workers gather in the name of solidarity to advance their collective interests, you have a union.
That's right.
Don't forget about it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We can fight back, and we have to. We don't have a choice.
That's right. That's right. We're going to go ahead and get our guest on. Randy Corgan, Brother Randy Corgan, is Secretary-Treasurer of the Teamsters Local 1932 from all the way out in California. He is also the National Director of the Teamsters Amazon Division. Brother Corgan, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be on another radio show. It's good to see labor taking to the airwaves and getting the message out.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually, before we get into this, I saw the Local 1932 Twitter account post a clip from your program. I don't know if you're on the radio or not, but I have to say, as an AFGE member, I appreciated your comments about, the federal government's, canceling of collective bargaining agreements and how, that's it's a bad thing. And so I just want to say at the top, I really appreciate your support for my sisters and brothers in the federal government.
Yeah, we have the Worker Power Hour. Yes, it's live radio. We are live every Wednesday from 2 to 4. As well as we run every day, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. On the local radio station in the area. Actually, our most popular show is actually the AFGE show, where we had a number of members from AFGE on to talk about the impacts of their collective bargaining being canceled. And, the reality, listening to you as I was waiting to come on and hearing some of your points are spot on. That, the irony in somebody saying that you're going to fire someone for their free speech, but also on top of it, the argument for workers not to pay union dues under Janus was the argument of free speech.
Right.
And so here unions are, have their feet cut out from underneath them. Workers have their feet cut out from underneath them when it comes to free speech. But corporate America wants to have free speech. That's born out of the fact that, corporate America cannot break away from its origins in America, which started in 1776, which is where labor was owned. And because labor was owned for the first 100 years in America, and then there were no rights for workers for almost the next 100 years, it really points out to the fact that corporate America and the industrialists and the landowners that controlled this country for many, many, many decades, and obviously almost 250 years, they just cannot be responsible without having some set of rules placed upon them.
Right. That's exactly right. Well, Brother Corgan, I appreciate you taking the time, and I like to start off with this, especially when it's somebody's first time on the program. Can you talk to us about, how you came to the labor movement? What was it about unions and the labor movement that convinced you to go all in? And now you're Secretary Treasurer of the Teamsters Local 1932 in California and the National Director of the Teamsters Amazon Division. I mean, these are pretty big and important roles. They take a lot of time to be able to do. And so how did you get started, and what made you go all in?
I started off in the warehouse industry as a lumper. Not sure if anybody remembers what a lumper is, but back in the day as a teenager, we worked for cash on the dock where the driver did not want to, unload the work themselves, didn't want to unload the truck when it was making a delivery to its destination. And so the foreman always had some lumpers off to the side that would work for cash. Me and a couple friends, when we were teenagers, to help pay the rent, would work for cash. And then ultimately that was a union dock. So you're talking over 30 years ago. At 18 years old, once I turned 18, I got on that dock and was employed and became a Teamster there at that facility. Worked there for a few years and then ran into a couple situations where the employer tried to crush my life and destroy my life. And I obviously found advocacy through the union. The local union itself stepped up, wrapped themselves around me and my situation, and did everything they could to support me, my family, and everything about the circumstances. And then I fell in love. I fell in love because I recognized that the union, that when you step into the union hall and you step into this space, there's typically a space for everybody to connect, no matter what your love is or what you like to do, that you're welcome, and there's something for you there to help out. There's something for you to get involved in. There's something for you to partake in. And then I got involved in organizing at 21 years old, started organizing facilities and places of business, and then became successful as an organizer, started to win a lot of organizing campaigns. And then it was off to the races. And then I have now organized more than 40,000 workers in my time that are now dues-paying members within the Teamsters throughout this country. Obviously, I'm now the principal officer of a very large local in Southern California, but I'm always excited to talk about that history because falling in love with the labor movement is, for me, is probably one of the best things that have ever happened in my life, because it teaches, the labor movement taught us history, taught me history, taught my family and my children how to take the next step and be empathetic to others and recognize what's going on around you, and as well as how to fight for one another, solidarity, and how to bring people together, and how important it is to understand, even if you don't completely agree with someone else's fight, principle, or protest, it's always important to understand it because anchoring into that space is where we win. It's where workers win. And then as time went on, I recognized that every gain for workers in America, every gain for communities in America, every gain when it comes to safety, when it comes to wages, when it comes to any working condition, every single one of them were gained by workers coming together and demanding a change, either at their local elected level or at the national level or in Congress. it was never business or corporations or the super wealthy that were lined up in Congress to pass a law to protect workers. It was always workers that did it. It was workers' demands in all the different ways in which they did it, many times withholding their labor. And the power in which they've wielded over the last 100+ years is what's paved the way for decent working conditions and what shifted us from very, very terrible circumstances for workers to actually putting workers in the middle class where they can afford to buy homes and they can afford to buy goods and services in their neighborhood. So I fell in love with every aspect of that. And it's a space now where you can help others do the exact same thing and learn our real history in this country.
Right. No, that's incredible. And I love hearing about people being pulled in by the union doing good for them. Something that we talk about a lot is how, Adam and I, mostly Adam, but I've done a few, we've handled lots of grievances over the years and like to a person, everybody's like, I never thought that I would need a steward to do a grievance for me. I never, I'm always like a good employee. And so, seeing people that take the union standing up for them and their coworkers standing up for them and want to, to give back, to pay it forward, I think is really great. And then learning more of that. I mean, that's exactly why I got, fortunately, actually, I don't have a story of the union like standing up for me because I have been fortunate in that all of my supervisors that I've had so far have been fair to me and I've never had a problem with them. Right.
They were trained well. They were trained well.
That's right.
And it's good to see. Sometimes people take that for granted. Sometimes they it's like, oh, I got a good. Well, it's good that you're not in that situation, but there are others.
Exactly. And that's what pulled me into it was seeing the union stand up for other people who didn't have fair supervisors and then reading the history of this country and how, everything that all of the freedoms that we won in and from the workplace were taken by us, were won by us, were won with a fight, and were not given to us. And so like, when I was coming out, when I was like kind of coming of age and being politicized, I got a real fire in my belly about like, I want to make the world better. And like, the labor movement just seems like the best place to do it. And so it sounds like we have kind of a similar thought pattern there. And so can you talk to us about the work that your members do in California? You mentioned it's a large local, 16,000 members. That is just a huge amount of people. And like many unions these days, I think that the members of your local are pretty diverse and that they do lots of different things. Can you talk about the work that your members do and how you maintain a strong union within Local 1932?
Yeah, the diversity goes this far as when I say this number, people are typically shocked. We actually have 875 different classifications, job classifications in the local union. Yeah. So that, it goes, it's teachers and nurses and public works and 911 operators, water districts, drivers, warehouse workers, you name it, we cover it. There's this old saying in the Teamsters that we represent everything from airline pilots to zookeepers. And we actually in our local represent pilots to zookeepers. We have them all.
Oh, that's great.
Not technically airline pilots, but we have pilots that fly the airplanes and helicopters for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department in the area, and we have zookeepers at some of the zoos in which we represent as well that are part of the public entities. And so, one of the things I always like to point out at representing groups like this is while there's this this huge attack on public employees and an undermining of their value, I always like to remind people of the water that comes into their community and goes out of their community. Mm-hmm. And, water killed millions of people in the 1860s because it had cholera in it, just New York alone. And so if you look back in time over hundreds of years or thousands of years, water has killed millions upon millions upon millions of people. And so here these really cool union workers every day make sure that the water coming into your local community is clean and drinkable and is not going to kill you. And then you flush the toilet and it goes bye-bye, right? And it just disappears. And as a result, these are Teamsters, these are union workers, these are people that are saving lives every single day. You dial 911 in our region, most likely it is a Teamster that answers the phone and says, how can I help you? What's going on? And starts to dispatch you in the proper direction. At emergency rooms in the area, you come in, you're met by a Teamster or a union member. Those nurses and LVNs and staff are catching you at your most vulnerable moments and making sure that you're taken care of and handled. And, these are sometimes services in which that are completely taken for granted, especially when you hear this rhetoric that you hear that, public employees, that they make too much money. And I'll point out on the making too much money situation. In California, which CalPERS gets slammed all the time for paying too much. Mind you, most of these people don't have Social Security benefits too. On top of it, the average payment is $36,000 a year in retirement benefits. So it's not like everybody's getting rich on this system. The average person's not getting rich. But I would like to point out one of our most amazing accomplishments at Teamsters 1932 here recently, which is when we organized 10 years ago, the local union's 10 years old, the 16,000 members that we have organized every single member into the Teamsters. My team has it. So we're in this very unique situation where the entire membership has been kind of built from scratch on the ground, knocking on doors and organizing. However, when we first organized the San Bernardino County employees in various classifications, they didn't have affordable health care. Their health care was costing them $400 or $500 a month. Some plans as much as $700-800 a month. And everybody believes, you go to work for a government, and guess what? You got free this and free that and all this retirement benefits. Not the case. And then they didn't have retiree medical neither. So people ran into the end of their careers, ran into a health crisis somewhere in their late 50s, and then would be thrusted into poverty as a result of not having any retiree medical component. And so we built from scratch a healthcare system, that a healthcare benefit that is now affordable. Some plans are 100% paid for by the employer. And then on top of it, a pre-65 benefit and a post-65 benefit, where now they are going to have either a supplement and or a help paying the premium for early retirement benefits until the day they die. And we did it by them paying for it themselves in a very unique system. And on top of it, our board of supervisors that approved it is 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. So how did we convince these individuals? We showed them on paper that they're employees, the circumstances and situations that they were in, what the employer's responsibility needed to be, got them on board. Obviously we have a little bit of political influence in the area as well. But that's what happens when you knock on lots of doors, you canvass and you make a dent in the political process. And then now they recognize and realize that this is a benefit through an employee diversion of voluntary deductions. These workers have been able to build a very robust retiree medical component. It's something that was very rare that you would hear, that in the last 10 years, anybody has been able to actually add that benefit versus it being taken away. And so it's very important for these workers in these water districts or 911 operators or nurses or teachers to know that they have that income security, they have that health care security all the way till the day they die. That is why I got involved in the labor movement. This is exactly why we do what we do, is because these things are possible even when someone tells you it's not.
That's incredible. I had no idea that the local was so new, and so all of these 16,000 workers that you represent have been organized in the last 10 years. That is wild. It is wild. It's crazy. So how do you do that then? How do you build a strong union? How do you win a union election and maintain a coherent front that can secure a good contract from their employer? How do you do that?
What a great question. I think that one of the first things we do is what we're doing right here. Having the Valley Labor Report, having a radio station and a radio show, and having this platform is one of the biggest things that we have done and that we are fully invested in. We actually have 4 radio stations in our building. They've moved into our building and we host them. We obviously advertise on all of them. We clearly have our own radio show. We then take our podcast and push it out, and we're on multiple stations within the region itself where we're adding that platform so others can hear even beyond the one that we're on, it's in the building, the ones that we're on in the building. The other thing that we have is we have electronic billboards in the area. We have multiple billboards on all the main freeways so that you see our members, you see our message, you see our narrative, you see our workers. The other thing that we're doing is we have a training center where we've integrated with all the high schools in the area. And one of the things that we do is once a year, we actually host a career day at the local union. This last March, 600 high school students came to see 40 different jobs where they bust in from their high schools from 20 different school districts in the area on a field trip onto our campus, and they got to actually see Teamster jobs, union jobs, and their eyes opened up and their minds were blown away at the types of jobs that were going to be available to them when they turned 18. And what our training center does is it explains to those explains to those students what those jobs are going to look like. And it reminds me of when I was a teenager that I already knew what decent jobs were out there if I wasn't going to go to college. And I was already starting to pave my way. All I'm trying to do is repeat the past and kind of get back to that space as an organization and as a result of that partnership. Then the next thing that we have done, which you're going to find really unique, is that we're in almost 30 chambers of commerce in the region where we are actually on the board of directors for multiple, and we've actually been the president of a few of those chambers, including just a few days ago. Yes, yeah. See, you're tripping out. Let me finish my stick here.
Oh my God!
And then you can comment. Just a few days ago, I was the keynote speaker at one of the largest chambers of commerce in the entire region, which is a city of over 200,000 residents and a region of more than 4 million people. It's one of the largest, and I was the keynote speaker, and I brought them together by pointing out our program. We have more than 1,000 small businesses connected to what we call our Teamster Advantage program, where we have our app. You can actually go and download it and look at it in the Google or Apple, you can Google or the Apple store, and you can see the Teamster Advantage app, and you can see all the businesses that we have in there. And you can, if you want Taco Tuesday, or you're going to get flowers for Mom and Mother's Day, or whatever's going, maybe you got a flat tire, you got to find a tire shop. All these local small businesses are part of our network, and we advertise for them for free. I have them come on our radio show once a week and talk about, one a week. They come on to talk about their small business. They get to talk about the goods and services or what they do. And what we've done is we've just kind of built these networks that all come together in a common space. And when an employer gets a bit froggy, they're probably a little concerned how we're going to use all these platforms. That makes sense?
That's incredible. That is awesome. I think I might have to have a conversation with you offline at some point about something so I can take some notes. This is really, really great. I've been having to talk to a lot of business people for the job that I do recently, and the idea that the president of the local chamber could be a union representative is I've never heard of that before. That's incredible. Right. I mean, I know unions that have had seats that have had memberships in the local chamber, but being in leadership or on the board of the chamber is I've never heard of that. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, it makes for interesting dialogue sometimes. Every now and then you get someone gets a bit froggy.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, and I've had situations where I've had people that would typically seem to be on the other side of something politically. I let them know, hey, look, we'll sponsor this event, but if there's any union busting, we're getting up and walking out in the middle of the event, or we're going to call people out. And what it's done is it's actually tamed the discussion, and it's really stopped a lot of the anti-union rhetoric at all the local chambers. And when you're in almost 30 of them, and you're bouncing around to all these, and that same message and that same narrative is being pushed through. What happens? They start to realize where the partnership can be versus being programmed by corporate America to pick fights. Because the reality is, at the chamber, we're all in the same space because these are small business owners typically that can't compete with corporate America to begin with. So why is it that you're carrying corporate America's narrative? Why are you carrying their water in these situations that are working not to your best interest? And
well,
and
you know,
we
I'll
find
say
that common ground.
Yeah, I'll say that I was at the Alabama Labor Management Conference a few months ago, and there was a fellow who was a representative of a major employer industry organization, like one of the sector-specific employer organizations, and he talked about actually how, funny enough, he had been in politics for a long time, and he had been on staff for like multiple Republican governors and senators and stuff like that. And he had a very, very one-sided view of unions from working in politics. But then when he began leading this employer organization that also included union employers, he got it's funny, he got a more nuanced view of unions as the leader of an employer organization than he got as staff or Republican politicians. But I do think that there's a degree of that can be, I think, overstated by some folks. But there is a genuine reality that so many people, quote unquote, on the other side, they literally just are ignorant. They think that having their workers have a little bit of power, being able to make use of collective bargaining and having a union is going to destroy their business and totally ruin the thing. And it's not true. And they literally don't know that because they've been fed this corporate propaganda from, all sectors of the media ecosystem. And so I do think that there's real value in just being in the same spaces as some of these people. So that's really cool to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, and they wanted to be on our radio show. We also have a 24/7 music channel that we do advertisements in, and we let them come on. You could do a 7 to 10, 15, 20-second clip that will loop in and let you promote your small business. This is all for free. We want our members to shop local. And they're getting it, and you can create, as long as you can create the platforms where we can collaborate, I believe they're going to be there. You just have to be disciplined, and it's a lot of work.
Right. We haven't even started talking about Amazon. I can tell that we're going to go long if you'll let us. Do you have a hard out? I told you like 30 to 40 minutes. Do you have a hard out at 40 minutes?
And I'm all yours.
Okay.
I love getting into this space where we can share and exchange ideas. So I've got time, and you've got me as long as you need me. As long as we can occupy the air, you got me.
Well, there you go. I appreciate it. So let's talk about that then. You are the national director for the Teamsters Amazon division, and over the last couple of years, 10,000 workers have organized with the Teamsters at Amazon warehouses and delivery service providers, DSPs, across the country. Can you talk? There are a few things like in the news that have happened recently that are going to affect or they might affect the Amazon campaign by the Teamsters. But I want to start with, why are workers organizing? What are the working conditions at Amazon? Because the Amazon union campaign has been a little bit out of the news for the last several months, and I want to remind people just the real BS that workers have to put up with at Amazon. So why are workers organizing at Amazon across the country?
Well, let me first say the reason why we've been out of the news is purposeful. We don't need to dominate the news all the time, because if you look at the way we dominated the news cycle in December, it was pretty darn, overpowering. And you got to pick and choose your moments as workers are doing what they're doing incredibly. And so the best way to describe how, the working conditions is, let's just use a simple comparison. A UPS driver, it delivers to just about does deliver to every neighborhood in America, right? And that UPS driver can afford to buy a home in almost any one of those neighborhoods. Not every neighborhood, but almost any one of those neighborhoods. An Amazon driver cannot buy a home in any neighborhood. They statistically do not qualify. So now let's move over into the warehouse operations. And if you go to work, let's say you're 18 years old, you go to work in an Amazon operation, like they are recruiting most of their new employees. You land there at 18, 19, 20 years old. How long is it going to take you to buy a home, to qualify to buy a home in the very area in which that operation is, put down? Again, that is very narrow. We're still trying to find the neighborhoods you can buy a home in if you go to work for Amazon. That is a massive problem when it employs over 1 million employees. Then you go with, that's the economic factor and how it immediately impacts the communities in which these operations are in. Then you look at the working conditions, that there's not clearly a fair exchange of difficult, extreme conditions. Working in this industry is tough. For those of us that came out of it and have represented it for 3 decades, we're well aware of those conditions. And, there's supposed to be a fair exchange where you do a very tough, difficult job, you make enough money to where the trade-off is worth it. That is why Amazon has the insane turnover that it does, is because workers get there within a week. We're finding that more than 70% of workers after a week of working for any type of Amazon operation are looking for another job. And so whether it's productivity levels or issues that are happening within the operation and how their working conditions are impacted, their benefits, their retirement or lack of retirement vehicles, as well as their healthcare benefits. They profess that they've got great this, great that, great pay, competitive, and it's not. It's just a narrative that's been pounded over and over again for the general public to believe, when it's really just not the case. And so what's it like, and why are they organizing? They're organizing because the workers recognize and believe, and they're educating themselves on what their rights are. Most workers in America support unions, but they don't understand the system, the process in which it takes to move through. And so as you educate them and explain to them what their rights actually are, they are exercising them quickly. That is why you're seeing what you're seeing happen grow on this massive level. Tens of millions of workers are following these workers at Amazon. Tens of millions of them are support these workers. We saw that in December when these workers withheld their labor for a few days just before Christmas. You saw the immense amount of support from the community, from the consumer, and from the industry as a whole and other workers. And the reality is because those others are now getting to learn. The community and others, the consumers, starting to learn of what Amazon's business model really is. And their business model is built on exploitive practices that essentially dump their responsibility either on contractors, dump their responsibility on others, or they try to turn you out as quickly as possible, just move you on somewhere else, and they get a new employee. And the New York Times a few years ago, they actually openly admitted that their business model for hiring employees was not long-term. It was actually high turnover on purpose. So, some people say, oh, well, you can't live in that environment forever. It's not true. Just think how many millions of kids are graduating every single year from high school. So the workforce is brand new every couple years. And the reality is that workforce is being exploited over and over and over again as each year passes. And what are they doing? They're taking charge. I think what is so inspirational is seeing workers, regardless of what's happening at the board, regardless of what's going on with this administration, regardless of who may be taking away their rights, workers are exercising their First Amendment right. Because what most people don't realize is the National Labor Relations Act, which was formed in 1935, was actually built out of the Wagner Act from 1934. And the argument that prevailed for protected concerted activity was argued on the basis of the First Amendment and the freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble. Because prior to 1934, it was actually illegal to have an assembly at work. In other words, for you to exercise your First Amendment, to exercise freedom of assembly, and to strike or to withhold your labor, it was illegal prior because our laws were enshrined in slavery. And so you get into 1934, 1935, finally the issue that breaks through is my First Amendment right. How is it that I have the freedom of speech and the freedom to assemble, but I lose it when I go to work? That became a compelling argument that created protected concerted activity. Then protected concerted activity has been enshrined in every labor law since then, whether it's a state level or regional or federal, when it comes to RLA or any of the rest of them. What's happened in the last 50 years is there hasn't been an education on what that law is and how workers can exercise it. And so workers in the labor movement admittedly had drifted away from it. And you asked me how we've been able to organize as many to build a very strong local like we have in San Bernardino, is you were listening to exactly how we paid that way. We didn't file NLRB elections in most cases. What we did is we demanded recognition. And if the employer didn't agree, we withheld our labor until they came to the table, until we came to some sort of peace agreement. And if the employer, whether they're public or private sector, can't appreciate that, then guess what? You're going to appreciate it when workers withhold their labor. So bridging that gap for these workers at Amazon and watching them actually take the lead, watching them run out and actually hold themselves accountable, hold the employer accountable, and inspire others has been this cascading effect to hundreds of thousands of workers that is just magnificent to watch and absolutely beautiful. It started with a handful of workers in Palmdale, California, that extended their picket line 20 different times in 2023. And then in 2024, you have almost 25 locations, then do the same thing. And all I can say is there are more to come.
Well, that's incredible, and we were following the Palmdale stuff, and we just talked about a couple of weeks ago how over in your neck of the woods, I believe it is, you were able to get $100,000 in back pay for workers at Amazon, and I think that's one of that's going to be part of the answer to this question. But we talked about why workers are organizing, talked about what the working conditions are like at Amazon. The TLDR is that it's terrible. It's a really bad place to work. How would unionization help make things better at Amazon?
So it's a great question. You use the $100,000 as an example of what had been won by the workers. That actually is ticked up above 100,000. That's going to keep going and going and going as more and more workers turn in their claims and get the back pay on the third break that they were entitled to, that of course the employer didn't notify them of, that they were obligated to. Once it was pointed out, those workers now know the system and are agitating the system for them to get, many of them, thousands of dollars independently each in back pay claims, and they're working our way through the system. And so how are they doing it? What's happening is that the workers are starting to use this claim as an example. They're chipping away at items and issues. Like some of it is making sure that they have cover because they're out on the ramp, that they have shade, that they have water, that they have fans, that they have misters, all these different things that impact the workplace. What these workers are doing is they're signing a petition. They then demand recognition on the boss. They then demand a change, and they chip away at it, and they get these changes location by location. And what the workers realize is yes, Amazon may be changing it there in that moment, but Amazon has the power to change it back if they want. And that the only thing that's going to hold it and make it permanent is for them to have a union contract. And so what they're doing is they're chipping away until they pile it all up enough to then get it memorialized in a union contract. And at some point, the legal process will catch up and hold Amazon accountable. Amazon cannot duck and dodge all these legal arguments that are on their doorstep, that are literally on their doorstep and about ready to overflow on them forever. At some point, they're going to be held to account legally in the system by multiple agencies, multiple organizations, and most importantly, the workers themselves. And in the end, let's assume Amazon completely disregards what their obligation is under the law. The workers are going to shut it down until they do.
And that is ultimately where workers' power comes from. We were talking earlier about the Air Canada flight attendant strike. Had somebody on from Canada to talk about that, and it's great that that workers over the past 100 years have been able to get concessions from Congress or from Parliament, as it is in Canada, and laws and rules and things like that we can make use of. But ultimately, we got those because workers before us were able and willing and did withhold their labor to get that. And ultimately, that everything rests on that as our key weapon. And so, I think that's what it's going to take to be able to build a strong union that can get these concessions at Amazon. And that's what the Teamsters have been doing. And of course,
Jacob, can I jump in?
Yes,
there? Can
please.
I jump in there real quick? This is the space that has been a void for too long. This is where we've got to lean into it more. You're 100% correct. Everything that's been gained has been gained by doing exactly what we're talking about right now, is by withholding labor, or the threat of withholding labor, a real threat of withholding labor. And we have to continue to occupy that space more and more. And the general public, the more workers learn and understand that they have this right, the more that they are exercising this right. And I think that it's really important for anybody who's advocating for labor, whether it's on a radio show or union representatives or shop stewards or members or workers or elected officials or canvassing, that we continue to pound this message, beat the street on it, and make sure that workers understand you have the power. You've already won. You've won because you have control of that operation already. It's whether or not you are deciding to exercise it. It's whether or not you have decided to actually withhold it and make sure that employer comes to the table on those required subjects.
And we're going to talk about one of those rules that workers were able to get by striking and building a strong fighting labor movement. That's the National Labor Relations Board, the National Labor Relations Act. And we're talking about workers withholding their labor and striking, and of course Jeff Bezos and the other robber barons of today. They're not going to take an attempt like this to take any amount of power that they have away from them lying down. And really, it's about power, right? I mean, a lot of people, that's what I think anyway. A lot of people talk about the money when it went around conversations of unionization, but I really think that the biggest thing that employers don't like about unions is that when workers unionize, that is them taking some of the power over the place where they spend the majority of their waking lives for themselves. And they don't, and employers don't like having to share that power. And so, Jeff Bezos and folks like that, they're not going to take that lying down. And one of the ways that they've been fighting this is by attempting to have basically the NLRB declared unconstitutional wholesale. They have they've got an argument that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals accepted that because the National Labor Relations Act has protections for board members and its administrative law judges, that those protections are unconstitutional because of the unitary executive theory, and so therefore the president should have the authority to hire and fire these people at will, and the NLRB that's illegal under the NLRA. They were able to get the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to agree with that. And so now workers within that jurisdiction in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana functionally have no NLRB protections. I've been reading some analysis of this, and there's some people that think that ultimately, if the Supreme Court agrees with this, it's not going to be the biggest deal, because ultimately it's just going to kind of speed up the extent to which NLRB board members are turned over. It'll be immediately when a president takes office rather than over the course of a few years. And so, but the biggest deal is going to be in the interim, right? Because right now the NLRB cannot settle disputes basically within Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And so how does this affect the Teamsters strategy with respect to Amazon, or really any of the other national campaigns that y'all are working on? We have a newsletter, Last Week in Southern Labor, where we talk about all of the NLRB election filings and election results, and the Teamsters are one of the most common unions in our newsletter, organizing at UNFI, organizing at Breakthrough Beverages. There are a couple of others where there are national campaigns. And so how does this affect the Teamster strategy, with respect to Amazon or any of these other campaigns that y'all have nationwide?
So you just asked a whole lot of questions.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. The first thing I'd like to direct people towards is we actually had Jennifer Abruzzo on our show a few weeks ago. And so if you look at the Worker Power Hour or the Teamster View podcast. You can actually pull the Jennifer Abruzzo show. We actually talk a little bit about this. Actually, we talked about this in depth on the show specifically, if you get a chance, because we dug down into this, and the reality is, look, let's be very real. These companies and corporations, and as you pointed out, these robber barons, they do not actually want the board to be unconstitutional, because remember, the board was originally formed, and this is the irony of this whole thing. It was formed to protect workers, workers, period, workers, not corporations, workers. And in 1947, Taft-Hartley then shifted some protections towards corporate America. And since 1947, there's been an argument to protect employers more than workers. And so depending on who the political party is in time, whether is in power at the time, they are going to want to protect either more workers or employers. Clearly, we are in a situation where corporate America is in control of this country, and they want corporations protected over workers. So the reality is this: if it's unconstitutional, then that means the rules are not going to, we're not going to be held to those rules either. And so that, I can tell you right now, corporate America doesn't want us being unhinged like that. They do not want the American worker unhinged without a set of rules on picketing, how picketing works, secondary boycotts, all that stuff. And so they've opened this door, and they now know they probably quietly know it's a mistake, because guess what? We can argue the same stuff then. Fine. You're going to play that game. Guess what? We can argue legally that there are things that you're doing, corporations, under the National Labor Relations Act, that are unconstitutional then. And I find it ironic that these companies want to take an obscure, maybe one or two employees from a New York case. One or two employees happen to move to Texas. So then I'm going to use the Fifth Circuit Court to have a ruling and a determination. Clearly, all of that is just legal game delays. It's just to drag everything out. And so the question that you asked, because you asked a few of them, but I think the most important question to answer here that you asked is, how does this affect workers? I actually think does it affect them some in the short term for slowing some decisions down? Yeah. Well, this process has already been slow. Let's be straight up. I've been doing this over 30 years. I realized very early on, no one should depend on the National Labor Relations Board to have a speedy decision, resolve something for workers that workers have the right to do themselves. Workers under the Act have the right to withhold their labor as a resolution to whatever complaint that they're seeking. So in other words, if at some facility of 2,000 workers in Texas, one worker is fired. If one worker is fired in that facility, and that worker feels like they were fired and retaliated against because of their union activities, the entire facility has the right to walk off the job and withhold their labor to support that worker. That is a First Amendment right. That's protected concerted activity. And guess what? That's what you are pushing workers quicker to, because that issue is not being argued to be unconstitutional, because I dare corporate America to then attack the First Amendment. I dare them. We will that script will be flipped right on their head, and they cannot take that away. And if they try to take that away, guess what? You're going to have an uprising that's going to escalate even faster than it's escalating now. So the point is it affecting us? No, because if you look at Amazon, we haven't filed in the NLRB elections, have we? No. Because we don't depend on, we recognize that workers from the beginning, before CMEX, and I know one of your questions is going to be on CMEX, before CMEX was actually in play, this entire plan was built out for worker power and workers to exert their ability to control an operation where they want to be recognized and represented. And they have that right, and they are exercising that right, and that right is growing. And so what corporations are doing right now is only proving the point as to why workers need to withhold their labor. Let's delaying this and playing this game. They're actually proving the point.
Right. Well, let's talk about CMEX then. That was a major decision that the NLRB arrived at, and it involved the Teamsters, actually. And for folks who don't remember, the CMEX decision basically said that if an employer so violates labor law, then the National Labor Relations Board can force the company to recognize the union, even if ultimately the election didn't go in favor of the union, because and also the union had to have shown that a majority of workers supported the union before the election by, a majority of them having signed authorization cards. And another point on the CMEX standard was that if workers with a majority of the workforce having signed authorization cards requests recognition and the employer does not file for an election within 10 days, then the NLRB automatically says that they recognize the union. And so that is the kind of the legal mechanism, at least as I understand it, that the Teamsters have gotten official recognition at many of these delivery service providers and places like that across the country. And so the CMEX is a big deal. And so can you tell folks what your understanding is of the state of CMEX right now under the Trump NLRB? Do you think it'll be overturned? And if so, how's that going to affect Amazon workers who have organized through CMEX decisions?
First and foremost, it's the law of the land right now. It's currently in play. So regardless of the new administration ends up having a policy or they appoint individuals that are going to try to roll that back, it is currently the path in which workers have a right to exercise, and that is exactly what they're going to do. They're continuing to do exactly that. And so as of right now, it doesn't change anything in the current circumstances. Is there a likely change coming? Sure. But what it doesn't do is no matter what happens with CMEX, it doesn't take away the worker's right by a majority to exercise their majority status, exercise their right to demand for recognition, exercise their right to make demands upon that employer when they violate the law. And as a result of workers learning this process and understanding where their power is, whether they have a CMEX decision or not, they have the right to do exactly what they're doing. And the employer ultimately has the ability to recognize, or in many cases, ultimately it comes down to power, is where that power finally lands. And when the workers have exercised that they have superior power, because they do right now, it's a matter of whether or not they're going to exercise it. And that is when Amazon will capitulate or recognize or start to bargain. Let's use some of the things that Amazon says in the news when the subject comes up and our workers make a demand or do some of the things that they do. Amazon then flips the script and says, hey, these workers, none of them have voted in an NLRB election. What I keep telling reporters is, well, why don't you ask Amazon if they're going to recognize an NLRB election outcome? Because they didn't do that with ALU, which are now Teamsters. And that was in March of 2022. They failed to bargain even in that circumstance. And so no matter what legal iteration is in front of Amazon, they're just snubbing their nose and they're just playing the legal delay game, which is, again, where you lean into workers and say, your employer has already shown their pattern of behavior. They are going to snub their nose at the law, and that's it. What you are going to have to do is you're going to have to bring them to the table by withholding your labor. That's it. That's the answer. You already have won because you already occupy 100% of the operation. So you have control. It's whether or not you're going to exercise that control and what you're going to exercise that control for. What are the terms and conditions you're going to exercise it for?
Right. That's a great answer, I think. And then, back in December, you talked about the Amazon workers striking at that point. Teamsters, like you said, they were able to give Amazon a big black eye, particularly on the media front. I mean, they were just the coverage was wall to wall all over the country in basically every media outlet. And there were picket lines all over the country, which was a really cool part of it. I was able to go to one here in North Alabama. And can you remind folks why workers went on strike at Amazon back in December?
There were a number of different reasons. One was to create awareness, to obviously get the general public, consumers, the customer, everybody to recognize that Amazon's business model and their unfair labor practices combined, it's just bad. It's not good. And that workers have the right to exercise in this way. They have the right to do what they're doing, and they have the right to withhold their labor how they choose to. And that message clearly got out. You just very eloquently put how the workers controlled the media cycle for that 5 days. And no matter what Amazon said, Amazon tried to say those drivers are not ours. Those drivers work for a third party. They're wearing an Amazon uniform, Amazon equipment, in an Amazon van coming out of an Amazon facility. And their PR, as wealthy as they are and as good of a PR system that they have, they got run over. The worker message plowed right through their PR machine and destroyed it. And the consumer, the average person out there started to recognize, you got to be kidding me. You tell me the person that delivers to my doorstep's not an Amazon, they have an Amazon uniform. What are you talking about? And so what happened is that made the consumer and the community lean in closer to that worker and connect to that worker and be more sympathetic for that worker's fight. And what we witnessed was, by the hundreds of millions, not just a few million, like, oh my goodness, the analytics on this was incredible, which is why Amazon could not get in front of that message. It plowed right through them because it actually came from the worker themselves. Yeah, you saw me and Sean O'Brien a little bit here and there make a couple statements, but 95% of the coverage was workers talking about the conditions they were facing. Workers talking about what was going on. Drivers talking about how Amazon wants to deny their responsibility but have complete control over them. And so the story was able to get out. So what did it accomplish? I think the first thing that it accomplished was them exercising their rights, them exerting worker power, and them inspiring millions of others to do the same thing. I can tell you the amount of organizing leads that came in after that, and absolutely, it actually started in August of 2024, and I'm talking tens of thousands, tens of thousands, tens of thousands, tens of thousands. And then more and more workers are like, we get these calls going, can you bring it to my area? I'm in such and such city. When are you going to bring the picket line here? Obviously it's not that simple, but you have this energy where workers are like, I want to do that. How do I do that? And they just want to learn. So what did it do? It opened everybody's eyes, just like yours and anybody else that was glued to that TV going, what's going on? So now what's the next step? You said earlier in the show, it's been a little quiet. Well, right. The workers accomplished their goal. Now what you have is tens of thousands of other workers doing the exact same thing. And more of those workers are going to be exercising their rights very, very soon. Amazon is spending millions of dollars trying to get ahead of this. Millions of dollars trying to figure out how to deal with the next wave.
And, of course, knowing Amazon and knowing Bezos and their leadership strategies, they're known to retaliate against folks. Did we see some of that in December? And if so, how are the Teamsters responding?
Sure, absolutely. As you go into any fight like that, someone's going to punch back. You have to anticipate that. And there was some retaliation that happened in January. There was lots of systems that were built and built out to help workers. But the point that I think came out most from workers is regardless of the retaliation, I just a couple days ago recorded something that's going to come out in a couple weeks where a driver said, the fear of retaliation from my employer pales in comparison to the fear of what happens if we do nothing. The direction that this is going, we don't have a choice but to draw the line in the sand and do something, because this is not good. And I would rather just move the fear out of the way of what I'm having to deal with now and whatever repercussions of retaliation come, and to what happens if nothing happens. Because again, that statistic I pointed out earlier, 75% of workers were looking for a job within the first week of going to work at Amazon. Well, guess what? They lean back into that and say, well, I was looking for a job when I found this one, because clearly it's not the best. So if it forces me to move on, it forces me to move on, but I'm going to help these workers.
Right, right. Well, that's actually something, back when RWDSU was trying to organize at Amazon in Bessemer, and that book still hasn't been written, I don't think. I think there's still some potential there, but I lent myself to the campaign for a couple of weeks, and I knocked on a bunch of doors, and that was something that I heard a lot of, was people scared about management firing them and things changing for the worse potentially. And, that was something that, exactly like you said, is basically what I said to them. It was like, well, they could fire you tomorrow, for nothing. Even if you don't organize, like, they can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, basically. They could change everything that you like about your job right now, to the extent that you have 2 or 3 things that you don't mind about your job. They could change those tomorrow for any reason or no reason at all, and without consulting you. The only way to actually abate some of your concerns about retaliation or bad working conditions is to organize. And that's the only way that you're going to have any way to kind of assuage your fears, is to take some of that power for yourself. And so if there's an Amazon worker who's listening to this and they're interested in organizing, where do we go? Where can we send them to get plugged into the campaign?
Teamster.org/Amazon. Teamster.org/Amazon. That is exactly where they go.
I appreciate that, Brother Corgan. Teamster.org/Amazon. Check it out. The last thing that I want to ask you is, many unionists, folks who are active in the movement, we have to wear several hats. Myself and Adam, we co-host this radio program. We both have a day job.
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Thank you. We both have a day job.
Come on our show. Please come on our show.
I would love to. I'd love to. But yeah, we do this. We have day jobs. We have positions within our unions. We have leadership positions on the local AFL-CIO Labor Council. And we regularly find ourselves looking for more hours in the day, just not enough time to do anything or to do everything that needs to be done. And so I can only imagine that it's even more the case for you as the principal officer for a 16,000 person local, the national director of the most important union campaigns in the 21st century. And so, if for no other reason, then maybe I can get some time management tips. How do you juggle everything?
Let me just quickly redefine this campaign. It is the most militant approach to organizing that we have seen in the history of this country, because of its size and because of the current nature of our political climate. The most militant. Think about how we're approaching it. Have you ever seen anything like that? And so I really appreciate you asking that question and trying to get people to hear how is it that we find that time, or the demands where we get pulled a bunch of different directions. I think that the first way to answer that is, there's so many great people out there, workers out there, that are willing to help. It's first being able to find those individuals that are willing to help, that are like-minded in a space that they're willing to throw some time in, maybe not 100% of their time, but a fraction of their time. And then collectively, you get into a space where you figure out how to share that big task, that situation that you're taking on, whether it's at the local, program in the local, or it's Amazon, or pieces of work that we're doing at Amazon. And then once you find people that are engaged in the spirit of it, that have it in their heart, that actually truly want to help workers, this is not transactional. This is a movement, and we bring those people to the movement collectively. Then guess what? You have the productivity increases. Sometimes, you have some differences and they're spirited, and that's a lot. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's good. That's what makes democracy healthy, right? And then ultimately at the end, you make a decision on how to move forward. But you find a lot of like-minded people, and then everybody helps carry the torch. It's not just one person carrying the torch. I am so fortunate to have lots of good people on my teams that are in all these different parts of the country on the Amazon, as well as parts of the area when it comes to the local union that I'm running. And everybody on the team is in it really bought into what it takes to help workers as a whole. Many of them went through the process themselves and recognize it. Many are inspired by a different reason, have been drawn in, and they want to help others and they empathize with those challenges. And so I think part of it is first making sure that you have a really, really good team and making sure that those people, that everybody's rowing the oar in the same direction and that you're not working against each other, and that you get feedback and you listen and you understand what's driving things. And also when the challenges start to happen, how do you help each other get over those challenges, and how do you build that network? That's what a union's all about. And then in the end, what keeps us going, and I think probably what keeps you going too, is the same, is we're tapping into that purpose. We're doing something bigger and better. It's bigger than just us as individuals. And we know we got to leave something for somebody behind. You gotta always, I was always raised that if you borrow something or you get something, always give it back to the person better than you received it. And that when we have an obligation here in the labor movement, that we have to do the best we can on this rock as it's spinning through the universe, of at least the piece that we have is making it a little better for others behind us. Don't just use it and discard it. What you have to do is get in, build it up, make it a little bit better. And you can't do that as an individual. You always have to have a good group of people around you. And then what that does is when you're burning the midnight oil and you're tired, they're going to come to you and say, hey, you rest. I got this. Let me get this through so that you can get whatever maybe it's rest, maybe it's just simple rest or a little bit of sleep, or maybe they're going to take on a meeting for you. Today, I have multiple events happening in multiple parts of Southern California right now where our teams are engaging in these events, and I'm here on a show. It's not like one person has to be in all those locations. It's multiple people that are engaged in the movement that are all letting it fly, and they're willing to lay it out and make something happen. Once you bring enough of those people together, incredible things happen, because we look at what workers did in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Look at what they faced. This is easy compared to that.
Yep.
This is easy. And man, we take this for granted every single day. It's difficult. We're mad because we see things going backwards, and we want to fight and make sure we don't slip backwards. But man, we have got to appreciate the fact that people had it way worse than we did. And so suck it up and take that extra step, put the other foot in front of the other, and make it happen.
Brother Corgan, that was a great answer. Secretary-Treasurer of the Teamsters Local 1932, National Director of the Teamsters Amazon Division, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing for folks, for working folks in the country, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks for having me on. Come on our show, the Worker Power Hour.
All right, let's get it set up.
That was great.
Right.
Yeah, I really appreciated hearing that, and great way to end it as well. That's a great reminder. And, we opened the show talking about how tough it is this Labor Day, right? We're celebrating Labor Day. It's such a tough time right now, where we're experiencing some of the toughest times as a movement we've seen in a long time. But he's exactly right. We have been through worse. We have had worse conditions in this country. We've had worse exploitation and oppression. We have faced more violence. We have faced more state repression. And, that's not to say that it can't continue to get worse and go in that direction. And unfortunately, it does look like we're going backward in so many ways. So, but folks persevered. People who came before us fought, they sacrificed, they struggled, and they did what needed to be done to make lives better for themselves and their coworkers and their communities, and ultimately to build a better future for folks like us. So, it's up to us to take that mantle and keep moving forward. And, eventually folks like, my daughter and her generation and all those coming after are going to be able to pick up the mantle as well. And ultimately they're counting on us, right?
Yeah. We got a couple of other things that we wanted to get to today. Both of our interviews went long. Those are really great interviews. Really enjoyed those. Hope y'all did as well. I know that I had a good time. We're going to get to Boss Watch. We weren't able to get to that in the first half of the program. Boss Watch is the other half of Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor, we like to take a look at what workers in the South were up to. Boss Watch, we like to take a look at what bosses in the South are up to, specifically how they are violating the law, how they are violating workers' rights, and how they're being held accountable. Over in Georgia, Sam's East and Walmart, which together operate a chain of warehouse club retail stores known as Sam's Club, will pay $60,000 and undertake remedial measures to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit filed by the EEOC. According to the suit, the Sam's Club in Douglasville, Georgia, refused to let a longtime employee return to her associate position in June of 2022 following a medical leave of absence related to an automobile accident. The accident left her with post-concussion syndrome, upper back pain, muscle spasms, and chronic lower back pain. The employee sought minor temporary adjustments to her duties as a reasonable accommodation for her disabilities. The employee successfully performed a shift with those restrictions upon her, but was later told by her supervisor she could not work with restrictions and would instead need to take another leave of absence until she could work without any restrictions. As instructed, the employee sought additional leave, providing Sam's Club with a date by which she would be able to work without restriction. Sam's Club then denied the employee's requested leave and fired her. The store's general manager told her that Sam's Club would not accommodate her injuries because they occurred outside of work. This alleged conduct violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits disability discrimination. The EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. With few exceptions, the source of a disabling condition is not relevant to whether an employee is entitled to an accommodation for a disability, said Marcus Keegan, regional attorney for the EEOC's Atlanta district office. The EEOC is pleased that Sam's Club will take measures to ensure that its employees understand this principle in the future. The approved consent decree settling the suit requires Sam's Club to provide monetary relief to the employee, post a notice informing employees at the Douglasville, Georgia store of the settlement and of their rights against discrimination, and train relevant employees at the store about their rights and responsibilities under the ADA, emphasizing that the source of a disability is generally irrelevant to determining whether an employee is entitled to an accommodation. Moreover, Sam's Club agreed to provide the EEOC with periodic reports regarding future denials of accommodation requests at the Douglasville, Georgia store, including an explanation of why any request was denied. Staying in Georgia, BWW Resources, which owns and operates Buffalo Wild Wings restaurants, agreed to pay $47,500 to settle a religious discrimination lawsuit filed by the EEOC. Folks who listen to the program will recognize this because we talked about it when the suit was announced. The EEOC's suit said that a server candidate who wore long skirts in public because of her sincerely held religious beliefs asked the general manager of Buffalo Wild Wings' Douglasville, Georgia location about a job opening. The general manager confirmed that the restaurant was hiring, but then mocked the candidate's religious beliefs. After the candidate applied for a server position, the restaurant failed to interview her or otherwise contact her regarding the open position. Shortly after, an assistant manager said the restaurant would not hire the applicant because it was unusual for servers to wear long skirts in a sports bar. The location did not hire the applicant and hired 5 servers within 2 months of her application, according to the suit. Title VII prohibits employers from refusing to hire a job candidate to avoid accommodating a religious practice absent undue hardship, said Marcus Keegan, regional attorney for the EEOC's Atlanta district office. The EEOC is pleased that BWW Resources has agreed to take steps to ensure that Title VII violations do not occur in the future. The restaurant's alleged conduct violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so the EEOC filed suit. The 2-year consent decree resolving the lawsuit requires Buffalo Wild Wings to provide monetary relief to the applicant, provide specialized training to managers, supervisors, and human resources personnel for the Douglasville location, and post a notice in the workplace informing employees of the settlement and of their rights against discrimination. Furthermore, the company will provide the EEOC with periodic reports regarding requests for religious accommodations from future job applicants, as well as employee complaints of religious discrimination or retaliation. Heading over to Missouri, Landmark Dodge and Landmark South Incorporated, the owners of automobile dealerships in Independence, Missouri, and formerly in Belton, Missouri, will pay $275,000 and furnish other relief to settle a U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission lawsuit. The federal agency announced last week the EEOC's suit alleged that Landmark Dodge had a policy of refusing to hire women for sales jobs and men for office jobs, and that the company retaliated against 2 human resources employees who opposed the practice. According to the suit, Landmark Dodge's owner told 2 new human resources employees that he believed women this is incredible. Women don't make good salespeople, and men don't work well in the office. The 2 HR employees quickly discovered the company's hiring managers were, in fact, refusing to hire women for sales positions and men for certain office positions. When HR employees opposed the practice and insisted on consideration of all qualified job applicants regardless of sex, Landmark Dodge retaliated against them by making their work environment increasingly hostile and forcing them to quit. Company records showed that from the fall of 2017 through at least April of 2019, Landmark Dodge hired no women for sales positions and no men for office jobs. During the lawsuit, the EEOC identified more than a dozen women and men whom Landmark Dodge refused to hire because of their sex. The company's alleged conduct violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits workplace discrimination based on sex, including the use of sex-based preferences in hiring decisions, as well as retaliation for opposing sex discrimination. The EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Missouri after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. The 5-year consent decree settling the suit and entered by the court prohibits Landmark Dodge from discriminating against persons because of sex and from retaliating against people who oppose discrimination in the future. It also requires the company to adopt procedures to ensure hiring managers do not consider the applicant's sex when hiring, and ensures that all Landmark Dodge employees receive training on those procedures. The company will pay monetary the company will pay monetary compensation totaling $275,000 to 6 women denied sales jobs and 8 men denied office jobs, and the 2 HR employees. In addition, for the decree's duration, Landmark Dodge must provide quarterly reports to the EEOC regarding its hiring practices. This segment of Boss Watch Union Busters, covering national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that union busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. And here are the new filings from this week. Marine Acquisition Corporation and Seastar Solutions, doing business as Dometic in Illinois, hired GRCA. That union election is currently open. Precision Cast Parts Corporation in Oregon hired Labor Information Services for $325 an hour. And just as a reminder, due to a lack of enforcement, some labor relations consultants may disregard the law and fail to report their activities to the U.S. Department of Labor. Therefore, it's crucial for organizers and workers to report suspected persuaders to the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management Standards. You can do that by emailing them at olms-public@dol.gov or by calling 202-693-0123. You can also contact your nearest OLMS office. If you need assistance with that, you can contact Labor Lab at contact@laborlab.us. Running a bit long, but I do want to make sure that we get to these UAW stories. Let's play this clip 1 about where workers were explaining why they were going to be voting yes in the union election at Blue Oval SK in Glendale, Kentucky.
How are you feeling about the vote next week? Pretty positive, because I come from a union.
I'm so excited about the vote next week, yes.
I'm very excited.
The industry is really getting its, digging its heels in, and it's about to just take off. I can almost compare it to when you're on a plane for the first time, and you hear and you feel the rumble of the plane. I'm just anticipating it, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm just anticipating the takeoff, and honestly, I'm so excited.
I'm retiring in 4 years, so I'm fighting for the future of the next generation.
I'm voting yes for a union for a better way of life for everyone within the plant and outside the plant.
I'm voting yes for a union because I want us to be a better environment.
I'm going to vote yes for a union.
I want to ensure that this company is the best company in this area to work for and to work with, for not just me, but for generations to come.
So there you go. Really exciting. The UAW, their video game is just incredible. And workers won that election by 11 votes. So very close. And there are 41 challenged ballots. So the challenged ballots are going to be determinative. But Adam, talk to us a little bit more about this election in Kentucky.
Well, yeah. First, I want to just put it in the context that this week also marks another milestone for the United Auto Workers. 90 years of organizing, struggle, and victory from the UAW. It was their 90th anniversary. From the Flint sit-down strike to broader social justice efforts, the UAW has really shaped labor history in this country. So pretty cool to see this big election happening on their 90th birthday. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what this means. I will say that UAW put out, speaking of videos, they put out a really cool video to celebrate its 90th anniversary, kind of highlighting the legacy that goes, even beyond contract fights. And as President Shawn Fain put it, for 90 years, the UAW has taken on billionaires and corporate power, and we've raised the standards for the entire working class. Our mission remains to fight the bosses, build worker power, and win a better world for working people. And so the video kind of goes along the arc of their history from the 1936 Flint sit-down strike through the 2023 stand-up strike, and underscores really how UAW is pushed not just for workplace rights, but civil rights, social justice, economic fairness. And against all that backdrop, again, we had this big win in Kentucky here at the end of August, and it's at Blue Oval SK Battery Plant. That is a joint venture with Ford. So kind of fitting that on their 90th birthday, they'd be organizing at Ford, right? And so as you said, the vote count was really, really close. 526 in favor, 515 opposed, 41 challenged ballots still pending. And UAW has characterized those challenged ballots as illegitimate and kind of called them an employer tactic, trying to undermine the workers' democratic choice. The challenge ballots are not part of the group of workers who built their union from the bottom up. They deserve to have their own union and an appropriate bargaining unit with a representative of their own choosing, said UAW. So what's that dispute here is like a unit within the unit, basically, that the union did not have initially in the broader bargaining unit, and the company is trying to get them placed in it, even though it doesn't really make sense. But that's where we're at with it.
It's worth saying that the unit is the emergency response team. So it's like first responders, EMS type personnel. And I've even seen some dispute about whether they're even officially like Blue Oval employees or whether they work for some contractor. I'm not totally sure about that. You'd have to do a little digging yourself maybe. But I just want to say that it's not as if it is normal that the firefighters who are employed by companies in these big facilities have their own union. Now, we can also debate about and talk about, is that good? Would it be good for the EMS employees to be a part of, of a union, of the broader union within the plant or not? That's another question. But the reality is that it is very common for these first responder type folks to be in different unions, and that was the intent of the UAW. It seems like from the beginning of this campaign was that they may have perceived that they didn't really want that that this group of workers, weren't really interested in joining the UAW, and so that's fine. So that's fine. They don't have to, and they were not asked to be part of this bargaining unit, and so there you go. And that's normal. That is not that's not a strange thing that the UAW is petitioning for a bargaining unit that does not include the first responders.
That's right. Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification, really, because it does put in context. And so the union's pushing forward to accept the election results and drop this opposition. So we'll see how the company responds. I mean, obviously, it's gonna shape relationships between the union and the company, like across operations, right? I would imagine. I'm not in those shoes, but I would imagine it's gonna impact the relationships there. The company, or Blue Oval, has been oppositional throughout the campaign, is my understanding. So it's not as if they've, suddenly taken a turn. They've kind of been oppositional from the start, which is a real shame, because Ford already deals with the UAW. They have UAW contracts, right? There's really no need for them to do this. And these battery jobs deserve to be good union jobs, just like the auto manufacturing jobs, right? There's really no need for that. And so it's really a lot of the same fights that we've been seeing throughout that 90-year span of the United Auto Workers. The challenges are new, the technology's new, but the stakes are pretty much along the same lines, right? It's about our power, our safety, and our fairness for workers in these conditions. And, the EV sector is really fast growing, particularly in the South. So that's something that I think weighs on our minds as we're down here in the South and we're seeing the growth of these jobs. But what kind of jobs are they really going to be, right? Are they really going to be good union jobs that provide for families, that protect worker safety, and that give workers an actual voice on the job? So this is a really big deal, and we'll keep y'all posted on how this pans out. Obviously, there are options for how this resolves. We'll see if it ends up in the National Labor Relations Board lap, or if Ford does the right thing, right? Maybe pressure can be brought to bear on Ford to do the right thing. We'll see. But I think it was really cool that this win happened on the birthday, or around the birthday of the United Auto Workers. And, I think that's the kind of energy that we need in the South. We need big, bold organizing here in the South. Like, we cannot allow the South to be a refuge for non-union workplaces, and for hostile workplaces, and for lower wages and worse benefits and inferior treatment. We just cannot allow that to be the case. For too long, these big companies have relocated facilities down to the South to run away from unions, to run away from worker power, to increase exploitation, to take advantage of Southern workers. They come down here, they pay less, they get, the Alabama discount, the Kentucky discount. So they come down here and they pay less, they provide worse benefits, they treat us worse, and they also have the advantages of friendly politicians often. Certainly the case in Alabama, right, where a vast majority of the political establishment is on the company's side and is willing to give them basically anything they ask for. They get generous tax subsidies and incentives and a lot of taxpayer support to have these facilities down here in the South, where they pay less work, pay worse wages and treat the workers worse. And we in the South, as working people, deserve just as much as anyone else, right? Like, there's no rationale for why a worker in Kentucky or a worker in Alabama doesn't deserve a union, doesn't deserve quality health care, quality retirement. It doesn't matter where you come from or where you're based. We all deserve a better life. We all deserve family, to be able to take care of our families, really, and to be able to sustain our families and to thrive and have a future that we can actually believe in. So shout out to the UAW for this organizing victory. We'll keep you posted on how it shakes out with these challenge ballots and how Ford responds. But yeah, really great work, really important work. It's important that these jobs in this growing sector be organized. So if you are in these new jobs, if you're in the EV industry, any of these jobs that are popping up here in the South, it's so important that you're organizing. We have to raise the standards. We have to make sure that these are quality jobs. There's a lot of money flowing into these facilities and into this industry. We need to make sure that working people actually get a taste of that.
Luis Leon, friend of the show, writer at Labor Notes, has an article, Kentucky Battery Plant Joins United Auto Workers in Close Vote. There's some really good stuff here. As always, Luis is a great writer, great reporter.
Absolutely.
He has some good context about the anti-union campaign that the company ran that we weren't able to get into. Also has some context about previous reporting about how dangerous it is at this facility. So definitely check out his article. Has some more, context about the Southern organizing push that the UAW is in the middle of. So really great. Kentucky Battery Plant Joins United Auto Workers in Close Vote on labornotes.org by Luis Leon. Check that out if you want to learn some more about this. There's another UAW story in Kentucky. They are striking at GE. We got a clip for this one, but Adam, can you give us a little bit of a primer before we play this clip from Sean Fain?
Yes, let me pull up my notes here. Let's go ahead and play the clip first, actually, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah.
I lost my notes.
No worries. We have this clip here. Couple of nights ago, Sean Fain gave one of his press conferences, one of his live streams, contract negotiation updates with the bargaining committee at GE. This is covering workers in Cincinnati and Erlanger, Kentucky. Cincinnati, Ohio, and Erlanger, Kentucky, I think, are the two towns. So let's play this. Let's play this clip here. Clip 2.
Good evening, UAW family. I'm here in Cincinnati with the GE Aerospace Bargaining Committee. We have an important update on negotiations, and I'll get straight to the point. At midnight tonight, our members will be walking out on strike. For months, Local 647 bargaining team has been hard at work negotiating to win a contract for our members that truly represents the value they bring to the company. Our members at GE build some of the most sophisticated engines in the world for the U.S. Navy and move billions of dollars in product every year. It's their work that makes GE their billions. It's their sacrifice. It's their time away from family. It's their blood, sweat, and tears that has generated tens of billions of dollars in profits for this company. And times are great for GE. From 2022 to 2024, GE Aerospace has raked in $17 billion in net profits. Over those same 3 years, GE paid out over $16 billion in shareholder distributions, almost everything they made. But the shareholders aren't the only people getting fat from the profits that our members' work generates. Over the last 3 years, GE CEO Larry Culp was given a 985% pay increase to $89 million last year alone.
Goodness. Let's pause right there for a second and just sit with that. A almost 1,000% pay increase for the guy who's already the highest paid employee at the company. That is absolutely insane. That's a crazy thing to justify. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to pause there and just let that soak in. 1,000% pay increase. That's crazy.
Right. Whatever the workers are asking for.
Yeah.
It doesn't come close to that.
Yeah, I don't think that the workers are asking for a 1,000% pay increase. Let's continue.
I think that bears repeating. The CEO of GE makes nearly 1,300 times the median worker wage at this company. Think about this.
Just pause it again. 1,300 times the median, not the minimum, the median worker at GE, 1,300 times the median. And GE is not a lot of the companies that have the biggest CEO to median worker pay ratio are like restaurants and service industry workers, like Starbucks, where I think the CEO makes something like 6,000 times the median employee's wage, and that's bad. It's really bad. Shouldn't happen. But part of the reason for that is that so many like restaurants and service type jobs are part-time, right? So the median Starbucks worker is only working 20, 30 hours a week, right? That's not the case for a GE employee. You know, I mean, the median employee at GE is not a part-time college student, right? And so the idea that you could have a factory job where your CEO is making 1,300 times more than you are is crazy. Insane, wicked, evil, demonic, satanic, even. Let's continue.
GE CEO Larry Culp makes more money than the big three CEOs combined. But when it comes to the workers who build the products, who sacrifice day in and day out, suddenly the company don't have the money. We hear the same old story time and time again. A company rakes in billions. The CEO is lavished with millions. The company pays out billions of dollars to shareholders, and the workers are left with whatever crumbs are left over. So if GE thinks that's going to fly, they're in for a wake-up call in the form of bullhorns and picket lines. For the past month, our members at GE have been setting the standard for what a strong contract campaign looks like. Every Wednesday at break time, a sea of red shirts marches by the offices of GE's management. I marched with them earlier today, and believe me when I tell you that we are ready to walk. Our members have made it perfectly clear. They're ready for a fight, and they're ready to stand up for what they deserve. So what are GE workers ready to fight for? Local 647 members are determined to win quality, affordable health care. The company is demanding and insulting increases for our health care. That's unacceptable. GE can afford to do better, and they're going to have to do better if they want to end this strike. Our members are fighting for true job security. After decade of our workforce shrinking, we're standing up to stop the bleeding and grow the workforce here in Ohio and Kentucky. Right now, the company's trying to tie job security guarantees to productivity metrics that they control. We know from experience, if job security language isn't clear, it's not worth the paper it's written on. After giving the CEO a 985% pay increase, the company is still offering minimal increases that are not enough for our members. This strike is on the company. It's on them to offer our members the contract they deserve. Unfortunately, it appears GE is more interested in finding or trying to lowball our members at the negotiating table. So GE Aerospace is about to find out. Local 647 members are united, they're determined, and they're ready to do whatever it takes to win. UAW family, we need to stand with Local 647 in their fight for economic justice at GE. And we'll see you on the picket line.
So there you go. Another thing that they said in one of their statements is that the company has responded to their proposals by making insulting counteroffers that would increase healthcare costs for workers by 36% over the next 4 years. Obviously unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, and I wanted to circle back to that CEO aspect because over 1,200 times more than the median worker's annual income. Local 647 represents over 600 workers, right? So, I mean, right, that's for scale, right? You know, that there's only 600 or so workers involved, and the CEO makes 1,200 times more the median worker. It's it's insane. Over $16 billion in shareholder distributions over a period of 2022 to 2024. So if you've got that kind of money, you can afford to provide health care.
Right.
There's just, I mean, you can't dispute that. You can afford it. You're just choosing not to. You're choosing to raise healthcare costs on workers who are producing those profits for you. So yeah, absolutely wild. And you know, definitely want to see this strike be successful. Want to see a successful outcome here. You know, it, like you said, Kentucky and Ohio. So, you know, the South is involved for sure. And a lot happening in Kentucky, but what these folks do is they build marine and industrial engines for the U.S. Navy. So you would think the workers who are producing these massive billion-dollar profits, who are producing industrial engines for the United States Navy, could get some damn health care. You would think.
Yeah. In a letter to the bargaining unit, the bargaining committee has a summary of where the UAW stands versus management on core issues as of the date of the strike. Wages, obviously, a big thing. The UAW, or the term of the contract, is another big thing. The company wants it to be for 3 years. UAW wants it to be for 5 years, which is interesting. I'm not exactly sure why that would be, particularly, you know, I'll say in light of the UAW's call to align contracts with May 1st, 2028. A 5-year contract would obviously, beginning in the year 2025, would not end on May 1st, 2028. But nevertheless, companies asking for 3 years. Union is asking for 5 years. Year 1, 2, and 3 for the company, they're offering a 5%, 4%, and 3% wage increase each year. The union is demanding a 7%, 5%, 5%, 3%, 3% wage increase over 5 years. And so if it was just going to be for 3 years, it would be 7.55. The union is asking for more job security. A minimum head count for each unit, new work at both locations with no string attached. The company has agreed to restoration of the 2011 COLA formula, so it looks like they've got a tentative agreement there. That's good. Healthcare is obviously something that they've been highlighting in their press releases as a big thing. The union is demanding no concessions on current healthcare. And the company is demanding 6% premium increases every year of the contract and increases to copays, deductibles, and prescription drug costs. Some workers would be in a higher tier, increasing premiums by 25% to 44%, even before premium increases. That's crazy. The UAW is asking for a little bit more vacation time, not much more. They're asking for Juneteenth as a paid holiday. Company doesn't want to give a new paid holiday. The union is asking for more retirement security, and they're asking to maintain current strike language, whereas the company is their position is they want massive concessions on the ability to strike. So obviously seem pretty far apart. That's why the union went on strike. So there you go. We'll see what happens, and we'll try to keep you updated. We would love to hear, whether you're at Bosk or whether you're at GE, we would love to hear from you. If you find this video and you work at one of these locations, holler at us, 844-899-TVLR. Tell us what it's like on the picket line. Tell us why you're striking. Tell us why, maybe you deserve a 1,000% pay increase instead of the CEO. Any thoughts that you have about contract negotiations and the strike, we would love to hear them. 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. Adam, did you want to get to any of our other topics that we had lined up, or are you ready to roll?
I think this cut it short. Well, not cutting it short. We ran 30 minutes long, so we got a little bonus for Labor Day. But yeah, I think we've got some stuff lined up for next week already, and really appreciate everyone tuning in today. Enjoyed the conversations, enjoyed these interviews. Looking forward to the Labor Day festivities. Hopefully everyone has a safe and happy holiday. There will be there's over 1,000 events happening across the country on Labor Day. So wherever you're at, I know you can go to, there's various websites you can go to at this point to find that information. Mobilize.us is just one of many that comes to mind. So check that out. Find a Labor Day event near you where you can plug in, go connect with labor folks, connect with community members, and build relationships there, and maybe have a good time, or at least, try to build something, build some momentum as we try to save this labor movement in what is a really dire time for us. So, bittersweet Labor Day, but it's going to be really important that folks get plugged in if you're not already. So attend a Labor Day event. There's lots of good events out there going on. So I know we'll be visiting some places on Monday across Alabama. Wherever you're at, there's something to do. So I really encourage you to make the most of it. And again, just be safe.
Yep. Yeah. I don't think I have anything else. We do have some good stuff lined up for you next week, though. We're going to be talking to Lori Wallach, a trade expert, about the trade stuff. So I'm really excited to have her on the program. I don't think she's ever been on this program before, but I did like a joint show for the Labor Radio Podcast Network with Judy Ansel from the Heartland Labor Forum. We talked about the USMCA with Lori Wallach. Wealth of knowledge. Really excited for that conversation. And then we got a bunch of irons in the fire for last week in Southern Labor. Haven't confirmed anybody yet, but lots of ideas and requests out. So I think we're going to have a good program next week. So looking forward to seeing you then.